Hey, I'm Peter Linz, and you're watching a podcast where nostalgia comes alive. It's Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Roll it.
Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Join Jake and his friends on a journey through pop culture of the past, where they interview professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and so much more. Who will they be chatting with today? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive. Happy to hear with us, folks. Of course, as always, I'm your host, Jake Duffenbaugh. And today, of course, our co-host, Chris Bixby. How's it going?
Doing good. Hello, everybody. How are you, Jake?
Doing great as always, Chris. Thank you for asking. And oh my goodness, yep, everyone to those watching and listening. We've had a lot of fun chatting with this such a wonderful person.
Oh, yeah.
Such a kind of big person in regards to with puppetry side of things, professional puppetry field over the years, and I'm sure you probably will. Some of you, of course, will know the name, and probably some of you don't. But I'm sure most of you probably will definitely know his work from your childhoods, and it's just so many things he's done over the years that I'm sure he probably will definitely will at least will know some of the work from watching it from television or just watching it growing up or just watch it just to give it just wing it or a lot of wonderful series that he got to done, but not just puppeteer side of things but also other things in different aspects in puppetry side.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I don't want to waste any more time. Chris, what you have for today?
Yes, we were very pleased to have a long conversation with a returning guest. You probably saw him on the Between the Lions reunion we did earlier in the year. Yes, there you go. Yeah,
And Cleo and Theo and all
yep,
those lines in the back.
yep, there you go. There you go. Um, yeah, so we talked more about puppetry, puppet building, and puppet mechs with the puppet mech master himself, Jim Kroupa. During our conversation, we talked about his involvement with Eureka's Castle for designing and building the characters for that, as well as performing the character Batley, puppeteering Chansum the Pelican, and building him and Binya Binya for Gullah Gullah Island. His work puppeteering Otto Otter, Jeremiah Tortoise, Benny the Bat, Ferret Jeter, and numerous other characters on Bear in the Big Blue House. Um, Building characters for Barney and Friends and Wimsie's house, and we touched a little bit more on Between the Lions and
Yes.
Muppets, Johnny and the Sprites, doing that show, building puppets, designing puppets, performing Seymour, the Schmoll, and yeah, a whole bunch of wonderful things. We talk about.
Yeah, yeah, such a huge person, kind of huge, bigger, puppetry kind of a field person to chat. So enjoy this, what Chris is gonna say. Enjoy it almost like a 3 hour chat, but it'll be all worth it. And of course, and I know some of you probably know him definitely as a kind of like a legend of puppet mechs as well. So of course we did talk a
Yes.
little bit of that as well. But yeah, go ahead, Chris. Sorry about
No,
that.
of course. Yeah, we talk a little bit about his work teaching the art of puppet mechs at the puppetry conference at the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center in Connecticut. But a whole bunch of wonderful things. Let's not waste any more time. Without further ado, enjoy our chat with Jim Kroupa.
Yes, enjoy our long chat with Jim. See you then. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive.
Yes, today we're pleased to have with us. You probably remember seeing him in the Between the Lines reunion episode we did, but now we're here for a separate interview with him, Jim Kroupa. Jim, happy to have you here again. How are you?
Oh, glad to be back. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Indeed. Likewise. Glad to have you
Abs
back. Glad to have you back.
yeah,
Yeah. Like,
absolutely. So to start this off, we know who you are, but for those who don't, could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
well, I'm a puppet builder, performer, director. I started puppetry back when I was like, I don't know, 5 years old, and started building Muppet type puppets in elementary school after I saw a special with the Jim Henson did on Muppets on Puppets. And from there, I went to school, went to regular school, and then I went to college. I went to Pratt Institute where Kermit Love taught, And through Kermit Love, I started working with him, and I started connecting with Jim Henson and the Muppets. And from there, I opened up my own shop. And then we did that for many years, and then we closed our shop, and I kept working for Henson. In the beginning, it was mostly as a performer, but afterwards, I started building a lot of their mechanisms and stuff. So I kind of became known as the mech guy, kind of by default. Wasn't a plan, wasn't something I set out to do. Let's be the mech guy, type of thing. It was, I just started. I mean, really learning from looking at other people's mechs and wondering why things were done a certain way. And as a performer, I thought, wow, they really sometimes they were difficult to operate as a performer. And I thought, wow, we could simplify this, dumb it all down and make it a lot easier to work. And I think that would help in your performance. So that's kind of the roundabout way. Since then, I've actually sort of retired. I got a little, I don't want to say I got burnt out, but the job and the whole field has changed a little bit. And it's funny, we're going to talk about stuff like we talked on Lions. You remember how, and when they shoot shows now, it's so totally different. The creativity level is somewhat suppressed. I said it's like the Disney syndrome. I said you try to get a straight answer out of 9 people, which means you don't get any answer. You get 9 answers, and you still don't know what to do. so it's field out there. I don't miss what's there now as much as I missed when we were doing the stuff back in the 80s into the 90s into the 2000s and stuff. I think my first professional job I ever did was 1980. I was the Wise potato chip owl for Wise potato chips. So we did a commercial. And,
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay.
from there, but I always built. I was always a builder. And I have the theory, and it's not really my theory, but I'm sure lots of people think this way. If you're a builder, you'll be a better performer because you understand what you're trying to animate and how it was made and stuff. And if you're a builder, you should also be an animator because then you understand, hey, it doesn't want to weigh 10 pounds and hold it over my head. I want it to only weigh 7 pounds, or whatever. So,
Right.
So if you touch both fields, you'll end up with a better product, a better puppet, and thus a better performance, which basically is the final thing usually on these things.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm kind of curious, what's your childhood in general before getting to start working in puppetry professionally?
I started with puppets. It was really early on, before Muppets. Was on the Chuck McCann show, Paul Ashley's Puppets. Was a Channel 11 show here in New York, and Chuck, and I think it was on 5 days a week and stuff. It was just like it was this incredibly loose, intelligent, crazy puppet show that also had Chuck McCann playing all these crazy characters and stuff. So I grew up with that, and I grew up seeing Bill Baird stuff either in person or on video and films. We always had Bill Baird films in school. They would show the history of the telephone, Telezonia. There was a film that was Telezonia, and it was always the Bill Baird marionettes of these things he made. So you didn't really know Muppets then, but it influenced me enough that back then I started making, not foam puppets. I used to start making, these kind of puppets with, whether it's paper mache heads or whatever. So, and I also watched a lot of TV, but there was other shows. There was a Winchell Mahoney time with Paul Winchell and his ventriloquist dummies, Knucklehead Smith and Jerry Mahoney, and just and stop motion stuff. I knew a lot of stop motion stuff. I loved, like in that when I was a kid, I loved the movie King Kong because just the creativity, from 1933 that they could pull that off as well as they did. So the field kind of fascinated me. So I always had this inkling to be a puppeteer, which, I know a lot of my friends, the kids want to do that, and the parents kind of like roll their eyes, and it's like, oh, most parents roll their eyes when you say you want to go into the arts no matter what. Don't you want to make a living? It's like, but you can do it. I'm living proof. My mother was very supportive. My dad wasn't not supportive, but he was totally behind me too. But my mother was like super like in people's faces. One classic moment was we moved from one house to another, and I had boxed all my puppets up, and the boxes were just boxes, and they were kind of like stacked in there, sticking out, like not like a closed box. So of course they show, all right, there's the girls' room, and this is the older guy room and the younger guy room. Well, they put all my puppets in my sister's room, and my mother had a fit on the guy. They're not dolls. They're puppets. My son's a puppeteer. Probably never dealt with a puppeteer's, mother before, or a puppeteer in general. So my mother was super supportive. Anything I did in the arts, I was always doing paintings and building things out of cardboard, and I was into Super 8 movie making. I made Super 8 movie. I bought the little editor with the Scotch tape editing and stuff. So it was, and no one in my family was really, if you look back to my grandparents and stuff, none of them were really in the arts. I mean, some of them, we have some of their artwork they did. My mother's mother was a very good pen and pencil drawer with like super, really nice stuff, but she never did it for a living. It was more like a hobby for her. So it's just one of those weird things that I kind of fell into it. And then the whole mechanism thing was kind of like some weird opening happened, and I stepped into it, and it all worked out for me. So again, I've never really had a plan, and it always seemed to just happen anyway. So I to this day I tell my kids, hey, don't worry about it. It all works out in the end. Trust me. Look at your dad. Made a little.
Yep.
Right. So now how did 3 design kind of like first come to be? And can you talk about kind of what went into kind of putting that together and kind of what your first project was with them?
Sure. So John Orberg, Matt Stoddard, and myself all worked at Kermit Love Shop. It was called Great Jones Studio. It was on Great Jones Street in the city. It's really 3rd Street between Broadway and Lafayette. It's like
Okay.
So Kermit taught at Pratt. So I started working in his shop, and I met John, who went to Pratt. He was an engineering major, but got into building puppets. He did some stuff for Henson and stuff, and ended up working at Kermit's. And then Matt went to Pratt for like a year, couldn't afford it, but got the job anyway because he was an incredible artist. I mean, talk about a guy. I keep finding Matt passed away a few years ago, but I keep finding like digging through boxes in the warehouse and stuff. I find like boxes, envelopes full of his original drawings from like Eureka's Castle and stuff. And this is a guy who just had the art and the sight in his head that whatever he drew as a puppet, you could build. There was never proportion issues. There was never like, oh, that can't be made because you only have so much height over your head when you're holding a puppet up and stuff. It's just one of those gifted guys. And it's just, you forget when he hasn't been around for like 5 years or more, and you forget just how talented it was, and you find something. But so anyway, we were all working for Current Love, and I worked there for 9 years and never got a 1099 or a W-2 or anything like that. But I learned early on that you never, when it comes to taxes, you never lie about your income. You always tell the truth about your income. Now, write-offs, well, you feel like you're owed that write-off. The worst that could happen to you is they say no, and you don't get the write-off. But if you say, hey, I didn't report all this income, that's a little red star next to your name probably for the rest of your life. So I learned early on that you don't do that. But Kermit ran his shop that way. We don't know exactly how he ran his shop. A lot of times the checks bounced when we got from him, so we'd all run to the bank and beat each other online trying to cash it. We just never knowing if there was enough money to cover him. So anyway, he ended up getting something happened, and the IRS came down on him really hard, and he came to the shop, and he said, all the equipment has to be out tomorrow. They're coming to check. So meanwhile, we bought all this, we bought the bandsaw, we owned all this equipment. So the three of us got it out of there, and we stuck it in the warehouse. We're like, well, what are we going to do? He's closing the shop down. He says, we should all retire. And I was like 21, I was like, yeah, I'm going to retire at 21. I wish, there's this whole, I don't have money thing, that's getting in the way right now. But, so that's how 3D design happened. So the three of us, Matt, John, and myself, decided to open a puppet shop. And, so we didn't know anything about opening a puppet shop other than we had to get a space. So we had other friends who actually ran they were from Pratt. They had some successful card company that they were getting rid of, and they had the space. They had 2 years left on it. So they said, you want to take over our lease? We were over on 24th Street, between 6th and 7th Avenue, I believe it was. And it was just a loft, and it was a shared loft. We actually had another guy in the back selling posters, and they were up front doing their card business, and everything was printed elsewhere. It was more just like shipping it out from there. And, they were like these really crazy cards back in the 70s or the 80s rather than. So we took over a space, opened up the thing. Now we got to get work. So Matt's sister worked for like the Daily News. So we got her to send a reporter to finagle a half an article on us, this new puppet shop in New York City. And we had to be careful what we said, because we didn't really have any track record other than working for Kermit. And then we built some stuff for Henson through Kermit. We took care of Big Bird and did, things like that, Snuffy. And
Right.
So we were really like sort of talking through our hats, if you will, about like, what we did. So anyway, finally, somebody saw that, and our Greenberg Associates in New York, they do all movie trailers and commercials and stuff. They're a special effects house. And this was back before any CG. So this was 1985, let's say 85. So everything's film. So anyway, they got this shoot coming up, and they're doing Invisible Man rigs for this commercial, huge budget commercial for Germany. So they wanted to know our blue screen experience, in filmmaking, back, Star Wars stuff. So we're like, I'm going to meetings, and I'm basically everything I'm blurting out is what I read in like Cinefex or Cinefantastic magazine. I'm going, yeah, blue screen, yeah, we do that all the time. So anyway, long story short, we did this commercial. It was a lot of fun. We learned a lot, and I worked really close. The two brothers, Bob and Richard, Bob was the producer, Bob Greenberg, and Richard was the director. I got along really great with Richard, so he'd have me sit in on edit sessions, because we were like storyboarding it, trying to us explain to him that rigs will get you this far, then you got to change it because we have to swap out to this rig, so you do an angle change or whatever you have to do. So it was kind of interesting to be, immediately kind of being embraced, because they didn't know puppets. We were the puppet experts. So again, make a long story short, they finished the commercial, client loves it, everybody's happy. Oh yeah. And it ends up winning 2 Clio Awards, Best Special Effects that year. And
Oh, that's awesome. Wow.
yeah, so that kind
That's
of
great.
and we did a lot more Invisible Man stuff after that. And then what was unique about our Invisible Man was in the old days, they put blue sleeves on the hands or whatever.
Hmm.
I would
Yeah.
wear. We built puppets that we could animate. So stuff like the collars would move. Like if the head turned, the collar would move just a little bit to give a
Right.
slight, suggestion that he's turning his head, and things like that. Little special things, little flippy. Like if it was just the cuff, we still animated the cuff like this, and it was all triggered and stuff. And we had like 3 people on each one, so nobody had ever seen that before. So it was like, oh, a whole different way of like actually doing it. And then, back then with blue screen, it was great to work with it, because we came up with this idea. We had a full figure set of clothing that comes to life in this apartment for the stereo commercial when the music comes on, and it starts dancing. So they needed a shadow of the dancing figure on the floor, because he's all backlit, he's all lit from the side. So we put Mylar down on the blue screen stage, and when we animated the puppet on the Mylar, they used the puppet reflection on the floor to draw this shadow, which followed perfectly to what we were doing with the puppet. It was just like really like totally like to be allowed to be that creative and telling them, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? So we did a whole bunch of stuff for them. Angel Soft bath tissue with the floating babies with the wings. That was it. That was an interesting. That was one of the first commercials we ever got in from the very beginning. We sat in on the with the clients and the agency, and so we're looking at the storyboards, and me being who I am, I say, I have a question. Oh, what is it, Jim? I said, are these babies dead? And they're like, I said, well, they're angels. Are they dead? I mean, is that the yeah? I'm not. They're all looking at me like I'm out of my mind. But we came up with a lot of interesting rigs on that, like the babies themselves floating. What we did with that was, and they had done something similar. You ever see The Beginning of the World According to Garp? Well, Greenberg shot that with the babies floating against the sky and laughing.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So basically, it's a giant, let's just say 8 foot by 8 foot, 1 inch thick Lexan table, glass, clear table, and on the floor underneath is tons of fluorescence, and they lay a diffusion screen over it so it just appears white. And the reason I use white, apparently, which is again learning curve here, we're working with film. White gave them the purest mat to pull from. In other words, even a single hair on a baby's head, you could pull the mat on it instead of getting those weird fuzzy edges, like sometimes blue. There's no reflective issues and stuff. So what we ended up doing was they placed the baby in the middle of the table on its back with a little naked baby, and we'd stick a little loincloth on him with some toupee tape. And we had built this rig, which was basically a pad with these soft mechanical wings that would flap, and we attached it to an 8 foot or 10 foot long, whatever, the really long fluorescent tubes, and we soldered a wire, taped it onto the back of the tube, and had the other end, the other wire, and we could put that to a rheostat, and they could balance the tube to equal the diffusion underneath. So we just basically, when the baby's lying there, we put this underneath the table, and looking at the monitor, we lined up the wings on the baby's back, and as the camera moved around like he's floating around, we would just adjust, and one person just sat there with the trigger going, bang, 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 making the wings do this. So it was really a creative time, and it was like interesting and it was all practical, which was our specialty. None of this CG stuff that we always deal with now, where it's like, oh really, like when we started doing the Snuggle commercials, people always thought it was stop motion because you never saw a rod. You had never saw
Right.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And that, knowing the commercials ahead of time, and you made rigs that the rods all hid. One of the last Snuggle commercials we did, which actually was with Henson, it was like we had these giant rods coming off the pup. It didn't matter. They clean it up in post. It was all like, just do it, and you get it shot so fast. So again, the creativity is like, it's fun to have that, try to figure out how to do it and fool everyone,
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's how 3 Design came about. So Kermit closed his shop, we opened up, and our first thing was a big hit, and we were off and running. And then right after that, Richard got a gig to shoot a film for Vestron, Little Monsters, with Howie Mandel and Fred Savage, and we built clothing, again, Invisible Man clothing, all these clothing effects, because the monsters live inside their clothing. When you turn the lights on, the monsters come out at night under your bed, and when you turn the lights on, the monsters all go like this,
Oh, okay.
animated clothing. So we were building all these crazy rigs, to match the Howie Mandel character and a couple of the others that would live under these beds and terrorize children. So that, and then right after that is when Eureka's Castle happened. We got the call for Eureka's Castle, and we couldn't even go to the meetings. And we'd worked with Noyes and Laybourne on a couple of commercials, and Laybourne is the Laybourne side of Noyes and Laybourne was the husband of the Laybourne who ran Nickelodeon. So that's there. So he's calling up, Kit's calling up. He's going, "You're going to lose this job." I said, "We're in the middle of a movie. I can't just walk away." So we set Matt up, and Matt sat in and took notes and made suggestions. We changed a lot of the characters and stuff. they already had the basic concept of what Eureka's Castle, what they wanted, but some of it didn't make any sense to me. Like originally there was no Batley, they had a condor
Yep.
castle.
Right. Okay.
Wonderful character.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love Batley.
So we were like, nobody knows what a condor is. Everybody knows a bat, and castles always have. So we made him a bat. And then there was the big argument about Batley. They wanted him to be clumsy, so they said, we're going to make him, he's got bad vision. So I said, no, if you want to make him clumsy, you got to make him deaf. And they're like, what? I said, bats are blind. They go by sonar. They use their hearing to get from point A to point B. I said, if you want him to be clumsy, he's got to have a little box and a wire going to his ear, and then he keeps hitting it. Oh, we can't do that. I said, all right. So that's how we ended up. That's one of those gray areas always on when we do these things. You kind of go, okay, we'll give you that one. And then we added the mice living inside the suit of armor, Sir Clank.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
They originally just had a suit of armor that would walk around the castle and I guess wreak havoc or something. It was a very loosely based show in the beginning, and then it kind of like after we did the pilot, with the characters we came up with, it kind of gelled itself. We had there was only one writer on the show, and it was this guy named Jovial Bob Stein, who we all know now as R.L. Stein.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It was so funny.
Yep.
It was just so funny to get Bob. Like you get the script and you'd read it and say, "Oh, he's setting up this joke. Oh, he's setting up this joke," and and there's no punchline. So we say, "Well, hey Bob, what if the character said blah blah blah, which was the punchline of the joke?" He'd say, "That's good. Write that in. That's great." So he was writing vaudeville comedy routines subconsciously. He didn't even know he was doing it. So, but then we got to write on the show. Noel McNeil, Brian Meal, and myself. We actually were asked if we wanted to submit scripts. So again, another lucky and Nickelodeon back then it was like their first or their second show they were producing themselves. Mostly they were an acquisition network.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
By existing things. So it was great. And we were left alone, and it was like the creativity could just happen. I mean, there were things we couldn't do, and they get feedback. Like at one point we couldn't throw Batley out a window anymore, because somebody complained. So we only throw him in the window. If he left, he had to fly, out of frame. He never go out the window. But yeah, it was a very different creative time then. This was the 90s. I guess Eureka's cast. Right. 89 or 90 something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah. So now I know you already kind of talked about kind of how Batley came about, but what went into the initial like designs for characters like Eureka and Magellan?
All right, again, then that all falls on Matt. I mean, Matt always used to say, "Well, draw what you think it should look like." And I said, "Matt, I can't." He says, "I don't care what you draw. I just need a starting point." So you do a scribble for him. And then Matt would do a page, like just a regular 8.5 by 11 page, with maybe a dozen different takes on it, the faces, just the heads or something. So from that, you'd say, I love the oversized glasses. Oh, look at the size of his ears. They should, those big ears would be great. We'll put a mech on that. Blah, blah. So and then it would slowly evolve. But the trick when we were designing puppets up until when we closed the shop was we never committed, here's the hard line design. We were always like, the sketches were just that. They were sketches. So when you build it three-dimensionally, you can still have the creative process happen, and you'll change things and stuff. And then once the character gets approved and is finished and everybody loves him or her, then Matt would go back and do turnaround drawings, hard line drawings, cleaned up drawings of the characters. We found, sometimes people draw things. We've gotten many the company would contact us and send us hard drawings. And you'd say, well, first off, the proportions are all off. Well, what do you mean? I said, well, if we were to blow this puppet up on the wall to an 18-inch tall puppet we can hold all over our heads, you can't get your hand through that skinny little neck you drew. So puppets tend to have fatter necks because you got to get a hand up through it. So just weird little things like that. But that's basically what was our process. and we included the producers, of course. Usually, once you do a show and it's a hit, it's a little easier to do the next one because there's the trust is there. I mean, I kind of laugh working at Henson. When you get these clients that call up and they question everything, and I'm like, it's the Jim Henson Company. We know how to build puppets. Shut up. It's like it's weird. People have been doing it for. I mean, some of the people in there doing it for 40 or more years.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
What you? Oh, and let me tell you, we get those sometimes. And then and I used to have this great trick. I'd be at my desk and somebody would come over and stand over me, and I would just stop working, and I just look at them, and when they walked away, and I start working on the puppet again because it's a pressure filled thing. It's art. You want to just going, and find the magic out of that chunk of foam you're trying to carve into a bat head or something, so. But it's a process. I mean, and it's no different. I think. I mean, I'm not a painter, but I'm sure it's the same thing when you do beautiful paintings and or graphics and stuff. There's you can't like predetermine everything that's going to work perfectly and just do it in an hour. I'm doing. I'm retired now from doing any of it, but I'm doing my own art now, and I love it because I build these sculptures, and I basically will set them up. And then I'll walk away for the rest of the day or maybe two and come back to it and look at it and then start rearranging and start thinking, now, why did I do that? That's stupid. Look at this piece. I'll put this here. So it's the whole creative. That's the whole thing of it being an art. If you wanted to, I used to say, with Henson, you're building, how many Burt eye mechanisms you want to build? How many, these,
right.
I get the same job at GM screwing that one door on as the car goes by. I put the left rear door on, that's, and it's just as creative as, another Burt mechanism, I mean, we rebuilt the Muppets when I worked for Puppet Heap, and we rebuilt all the Muppet Show characters.
Yeah, Podranko, yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So it was somewhat the creative door was open. I mean, Henson likes to do traditional stuff. And I get that, but if the materials are better, if there's better ways to do it, I get, back in the 60s when this was all happening, you had what you had to work with, and it was all good. It was all like, marvelous. But I tell you, I can build the same set of IMAX, and put it into 3 different puppets, years apart, and I build them slightly differently because you discover, well, that kind of stinks the way that moves, or that's the thing that broke last time. Maybe I can do that better. What's wrong with making it better? So that to me is part of the being the next guy. I teach a class. I teach at the O'Neill every year. I teach a mechanism class. Yeah, I'll show you. I'll just quickly show you this is what we built this year. So
that's really cool.
Okay, that's cool.
So you get to work one eye, the other eye. You can work both eyes, and you get a mouth.
That's nice.
That's cool.
So anyway, the point being, I'm passing it on when I teach my participants about Jim Kroupa mechanisms. I said, I don't want you building Jim Kroupa mechanisms. I want you to build better ones. I said, this is my approach. It worked great. I'm quite sure there's better materials, lighter materials, or whatever, or slightly different. And some people sometimes will send me stuff, and yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, I'm not a fan of 3D printing, but there are certain times the Monkey Boys have done certain things. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Those guys are good. Those guys are great too.
They're wonderful.
Yeah, they were for my part. I don't know how many. I think I had 4 of them that were participants in one year at the O'Neill, and it was great. And you get these. So they, my little slide trigger thing, which is all usually handmade out of things, they said we wanted to scan it and create it on an app and have it machined out of a block of ABS. But they asked permission to do it. I said, yeah, absolutely. So I said, just send me a couple. Let me see what they're like. So they sent them, and they were like, when you're building this stuff, sometimes when you're on a shoot, you don't necessarily have the hour or two to knock out a trigger. But if you have a drawer full of them, no big deal. You just have to tap a couple of holes, and you're on your merry way. So I had them build me, when they did this, I had them send me like, I asked for a gross of them. I said, send me how much? And they were like $3 a piece. I thought to myself, if I built one, am I charging $3 for it? Not even $6. I'm charging a lot more for it. But if I can have a drawer full, but now with the 3D printing, and it's gotten, I mean, I didn't like it in the beginning. I thought it was kind of like the plastic. I thought it was kind of like inferior, and there was a lot of failure and a lot of heat issues and stuff. But the new stuff with the nylons and stuff, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. David Valentine, when he was working at Henson, was doing that.
Yeah.
And the stuff he was showing me was pretty phenomenal. I mean, but to me, that's not me. You hire me, you know what you get. You're going to get like more hands-on, and they'll work just as well. And again, part of my claim to fame was when I used to send stuff out, it very rarely, if ever, had any mechanical issues, any breaks or anything. And keeping it simple, if it does, something happens, it's really simple to fix it.
Yeah.
So that's
Right.
just, it's just a different thought process. And so I pass that on, and I hope the next even better than me. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
we wouldn't be doing this now if somebody else didn't, like push it. Let's see what we can do. And now we can do these crazy podcasts now. And reach.
Yeah, I
Exactly.
know.
Yeah. And now it's like a
Yeah.
huge thing,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because back in that time, it wasn't really a huge thing, and it was like, I don't think the podcast term wasn't even a thing during that time. Then now this generation, it really
There's
shows.
like so many different podcasts.
Like you can literally just create it. Like it's crazy.
Anything. You can find anything. I mean, and I kind of like that. That's the part I like about it. Like not even just podcasts. I'm always like, I wasn't a big internet guy until a piece on my lathe broke. So somebody said, well, you should look it up on the internet. So I put in the lathe company. Of course, it's from Germany. So I'm ending up in Germany. So now I'm going, well, United States. Fine. And I finally find the part in Virginia. And in 2 days, it's at my house. And I'm thinking, okay, this isn't so bad. That's pretty good. That this can happen. We still order from McMaster. When we were working at Puppet Heap, we ordered from McMaster in the morning. You had it at McMaster by the afternoon. And I'm like, how does that even happen? What do you throw it in a car and some guy drives it over or something? I mean, it's just like, it's just crazy what's out there now. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course, indeed. Yeah, Mark and Michael from Monkey Boys here, they're wonderful. So now, since we already talked about, building, puppets for Eureka's castle and all that, of course, as like a builder standpoint, can you kind of talk about like what kind of like the main differences between building smaller puppets to larger puppets, like Magellan?
Yeah, well, that's part of like when we were like in the beginning, everybody wants mechanisms. So we're like, well, they're all like, well, what do you want a mechanism? Well, the eyes move. I said, what do you mean you want to see the eyes move? So I put on a puppet with no mechanism. I said, look, the eyes just moved, aren't they? Like, I used to say, oh, like Miss Piggy's eyes? They go, yeah, like Miss Piggy's eyes move. I said, okay. And I put the puppet on. I said, see, that's just how So I'm a stickler on, if you're going to do a mech, the mech has to do something. So there's two types of mechs. There's the mech that allows more expression out of the puppet or achieves a change in whatever to get the puppet to talk without speaking, just lifting one eyebrow or the eyes closed or whatever. And then there's the reason for using mechs is it's a small puppet, like a Rizzo puppet or something like that.
Right.
So to me, those are the two reasons why you would do mechs. But my stickler on this whole thing is, all right, you got to do the mech, but if you make a mech that's so difficult to operate and the puppeteer struggles with it, that shows in the performance. And I a lot of the way I build by using other people's mechs, Henson included. Henson, part of Henson's thing was the early builders. Some of them were puppet people, but some of them are engineers. So it's like you need a combination of both. But sometimes the engineers got a little carried away with, the way they would design them and stuff. We were doing Bear in the Big Blue House, and Bear's eyes kept popping. The line kept breaking on Bear's eyes. So I would go in and undo the mech, take it all apart. So I think it was Larry would show up to fix it. Maybe it was Tim. Well, they might have took turns. But anyway, the point being, I take it all apart, and I would discover that for some reason they used all these different size screws. And it's a pretty sizable head, Bear's head. There's no reason.
Right. Yeah.
A 440 screw could have held this entire mechanism. You need one tool to take it apart, instead of like how many different size Allen wrenches. Oh, no, look, now it's a little Phillips screwdriver I need. It's like, so it was like, it's my thinking on it is to standardize screws like that. Also, you don't need to have a lot of screws in stock. You basically have, if you go with 440s, you can just have a handful of different sizes and everything, and the one tool to use it, and the one tap to tap the plastic so the screw goes in, and this, that, and the other thing. Right. So it's my approach is like standardizing and simplifying everything. So when things do break, I don't have to scramble. Hey, get me that Allen, looking for the right Allen wrench, or looking for, that screwdriver's no good. Give me a slightly smaller one. It's all like, it's been standardized and be taken apart. The floor and Bear's thing, which I thought was so funny, and where it kept breaking was there was a little pulley in the front of the Bear's nose, so the line came back from the mech, went across, and did a 180 turn. So basically, it turned around so he could do the slide to work it. But they use such a tiny pulley that there's a lot of stress on the line. Whereas if you use a bigger pulley, I mean, we had done it in science class when you do the pulley experiments.
Yeah.
Easier, everything. Yeah. So there was no reason. I was trying to think now. So what was the reason other than, if you had very little space, yeah, I do it all the time too. You use very small things, and it does make for different issues. But in this case, you could have simplified everything, and probably would not have broke if at all, or as often at least, using a slightly bigger pulley. But at that time, I was not. This might have been pre the mech guy, so I was more like being respectful to everyone's work up to that point, whether it be Foz or whatever. I mean, Foz was brilliant, but Foz had a way of doing things, and he used to look me in the eye, and he'd say to me, "I'm out to destroy puppetry," and I said, "Well, no, you're enhancing it." That's sort of like, to me, that's how I look at CG. Also now, I say the only thing CG shouldn't basically replace a performance. It should enhance it, and if they use it that way, I'm cool with it. But if they, we've been on shoots where it's like, you could just tell that they think they should have just went with CG for what they want to do, as they wouldn't accept it being a puppet, and you have to shoot it a certain way. There are starts and stops. There's this and that. We have to set a rig, and you do it all on action, all the cutting and stuff. You think it's all the viewer sits there and believes every moment of, point A to point B to point C, to point D, and result. But it's, I don't know. It's just an old style of thinking, and it got me this far, so I never changed it, even when it was changing out there for us. And we always got work anyway at our shop, so it was fine.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. So I know you kind of like talk a little bit already with Bailey, but can you kind of talk about like more like what kind of like getting into design and of course, getting to perform that character?
What, Batley?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Batley was like an interesting character. When we were casting Eureka's Castle, we had everybody read basically for everyone. And sometimes you also cast knowing the puppeteers you're using, like Noel McNeil. Talk about a guy, you put him in a body puppet.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I remember Noel when we first came to Eureka's Castle,
guy.
convinced that I was going to want to do Magellan because he was kind of like, not that he was the star of the show, but he was the main character of the show, other than Eureka. Batley was kind of like the third character, and then he says, "Oh, I thought you would want to do. You did, because we all went through it and auditioned." And I said, "Oh no, absolutely not. No." I said, "Man, you are the guy to do I said, you are Magellan, and then ultimately he became, he does things in a body puppet that unless have that in you, you can't learn that stuff. It just flows. So I was thrilled with Batley because I'm an okay puppeteer. I'm not top notch, but I can do it all at my level, at my comfort level. And my comfort level is I don't like and probably because I never really took acting lessons or anything or any kind of thing like that. But I don't like lots of words to deliver. We used to have these arguments with copyright people on commercials where they would literally write 28 seconds of dialogue for the puppet to just sit there. They're going like this, and we say that's great, but the puppet needs time for reactions. It's Kermit Love had a great thing, and I use it all the time. Puppets don't act; they react. Meaning, you have to allow time for the puppet to respond and then say, there's so
Exactly.
in a commercial that's a 30-second spot is really 28 seconds. It's a second in and out. You can't write 27 seconds worth of dialogue. So we would get them to get rid of dialogue, or have the dialogue be more of a voiceover thing, and the puppet's doing something, just because otherwise, it's flapping gums. I used to call we're doing radio. This is a radio spot that you want to put a visual to. I said, let's visualize. That's when Snuggles started doing like Snow Static Cling with the socks and all these rigs and stuff. It was, it's eye opening for the agencies because again, when you hire puppet people, I mean, if I hired a musician to write my music, I wouldn't tell them, hey, I think there should be more drums. I'd be like, yeah, that sounds great. It's like, you're the guy, I hired you. You sort of like you got to have a little trust here. So we were always that way with the puppet stuff. It's like, look, and then giving the parts to people. So I ended up with Batley, and it was funny. We had I just started playing him the way he wasn't such a nasty character. I mean, he wasn't nasty. He was like the bratty older brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's funny.
Yeah. But I used to love scenes where Batley was in the scene and the dialogue was all Eureka heavy or whoever, Magellan or whatever, and Batley just had a line or two, because then I could just do puppetry, the art of the puppet listening and reacting to what's being said without distracting. People tend to think, that's what's great about mechanisms. People, even if they're just paying attention, they want to go, geez, what are you? And you're just interrupting the flow of the dialogue, as opposed to if you can do the eyes and he looks away shaking and the eyes come back or the ears go, or just some sort of a mechanism, reaction. It doesn't interfere with what else is going on. So that's, so that was what was great about Batley when I got to do Batley. And then, we had a Brown Johnson was the producer from Nickelodeon on it, and she was great. She let us do a lot of things, but she always saw the show as the Eureka show, and we were trying to. The trouble with a lot of kids, it's an industry problem with television shows, and it's an industry problem. At least it was back then. It's probably less so now with toys.
Yeah.
It's so easy to entertain boys and design toys for boys. Girls, it's always like, oh, make another doll, and we'll give her a blue dress this time. Or, it's always like that kind of a thing. So when we did Eureka's Castle, Brown really always wanted it to be little girls loving it for Eureka, and they would do these studies, and the little girls loved it for Batley, and it blew her away, and she couldn't get it. She couldn't get it. So finally, one day, I looked at her and I said, well, Brown, don't you get it? Batley's the older bastard brother that they all hate. And it gets his, and there's a resolve, and whether, whatever it is, happy ending, I said, so that right. Connecting with these girls. I said, who cares how we connect? You want to connect with your audience. That just happens to be the way it's going right now. I mean, we kind of softened him. He had a couple of moments where, earlier on, he was a bit of a complainer and stuff, and we were like, let's make it, more slapstick and stuff. I mean, he can't get that stuff now, though. It's so weird.
Right.
We had so many I was working with on Helpsters a couple seasons ago.
Yeah, another one for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, and I was working with Marty. I did Mr. Prim's hand.
yeah.
I had to do, and I had second,
That's cool.
but it was so much fun. But the stuff that you know, little stupid things that would happen that as a performer you go, oh my God, that was amazing. They would say, no, we can't do that. We don't want kids. That kid could get hurt seeing that. And you kind of go, really? Mr. Prim was like doing with his hands. He was doing something with string,
Right, right.
and it hooked onto his nose, and he stopped, and he shook it off, and then went back to his thing. They said, "Oh no, cut, cut, cut! Now we can't have the nose. Kids will hang themselves." We're like, really, really? I planned to do that. It would never happen. You do 100 takes, and it never happened. And the fact that Marty and I were connected, that it just looked so like we rehearsed it that way 100 times, and they never use it. So it's just funny.
That's wild.
Now it's like a different kind of there's always paranoia back then, making TV shows. Mostly it's about getting done on time and on budget. Now it's all about showing something that kids that that you can be blamed for, I guess, or something. I don't know.
Worrying that you're gonna say like the wrong thing or whatever.
Yeah,
right. It was what was the right thing to say.
Yeah, right way to say it, or yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
bad examples too. I mean, when I was a theater major in college, and I would, one of the courses I took, you basically got free tickets to go to a Broadway show and write about it. And if the show was beautiful, I had a really difficult time writing about it because it was a wonderful show. However, if the show really stank and there were so many flaws in it, those are easy because in my mind, I learned so much more from a bad production than I ever learned from a good production. Because you'd say, well, I wouldn't do that. I would do this. That would have been so much better. Would have got a bigger laugh. And da 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 da. So a little bit, it's a little bit out of the performer's hands now when you perform and stuff. And I think it's less fun. And sometimes I think that shows up on the. It only shows up on the outtake reel, that type of stuff. Now,
Right.
But, I sort of get it too. I mean, it was one of those rare occasions with Eureka's Castle where they, I always say it would never happen again because they just basically left us alone, and there was no time restraint because we shot little pods, so if the pod ran 3 minutes or 6 minutes, it didn't matter because when they assembled the show, like Sesame Street, when they do all the little things all over the place, so if you're tied to that 26-minute format for a half hour. And you got commercials, and you got to do this. A lot of stuff gets, lost. There's no time for business shtick. I mean, I grew up watching shtick. I grew up with, Three Stooges, Laurel and Hardy,
Yeah.
Harold Lloyd. It's all based, and it's all business. It's all shtick, and it all was. It made the characters as identifiable as Ernie's shirt. You saw that shirt, you knew it was Ernie. That type of thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Former had this shtick. I mean, Ernie, just the way Ernie laughs and Bert. I mean, he's the only one.
Yeah.
Nobody else laughs that way. So that to me is again the weird creativity that's been sort of stifled a bit right now.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, of course. I mean, that show. I mean, there are a lot of wonderful puppeteers, like you already mentioned with Noah, and of course, Cheryl Blaylock, Pam Marciero, and so many wonderful puppeteers on that show. And the Christmas special that they got to do, Christmas at Eureka's Castle, that's such a wonderful special too.
That's the best thing we ever did, and it was one of those weird, not weird, but wonderful times because we spent I think we shot at least a full 7 days on just the 1/2 hour. So it was
Wow.
And I'll tell you, the glue that held that show together, start to finish, every moment of footage that was shot was directed by Hugh Martin. And
Hugh, he's
my
great.
goodness.
Yeah. Womp, dear friend of ours.
He is, yeah, he's like, I remember the first time working for Hugh, we actually were doing a government film on role stereotyping. So we built all these puppets at Kermit's shop. And it was monsters and kids. And the kids had dreams that they were the monsters, and the monsters all had jobs. But in the kids' minds, the daddy was doing what the mommy should be doing because the way as human beings, whereas girls can also, they don't have to just stay home and clean the house. They can get a job. So that was sort of like the whole gist of the thing. So anyway, we're going to do this film. Noel worked on it. Pam.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
yeah. I think every puppeteer was on special.
who's directing it? So they go, oh, I got this. They bring in this Martin. So I said, Hugh Martin, who's that? He said, oh, he's has he done? Oh no, I said, has he done puppets before? They said, oh yeah, he's worked on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So I was like,
yep.
Now I love Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I thought it was a great show.
Yes, it is. Us too.
No, but I thought to myself, well, this is not like those type of puppets. This is whole like more like the Muppet thing. So, but anyway, I couldn't have been more wrong. Hugh came onto the set, and it was. I said, wow. So when Eureka's came up, any show that came up, we used to say, call Hugh Martin. If you get Hugh Martin, you're miles ahead. Anyway.
Yeah, he's awesome. We've had him on the podcast before too. He's wonderful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and the one from Mario as well. He's a great dear friend of ours too.
Yeah. They're all wonderful. So now going back just a little bit more to Eureka's Castle, for the Eureka fans out there, is it fine if we can hear a little bit of Batley?
Oh yeah, Batley he was a little bit Brooklyn. He's kind of like a take on Bugs Bunny. Yeah, I meant to.
That.
And then we would come up with phrases and stuff, and Magelli, old pal. You always call him Magelli.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
I was one of those guys too. When I did scripts, it was kind of funny. We tape our scripts up. A lot of times it's because they keep changing lines, so you're crossing stuff out, adding stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, and I have for most of my life, my memory it's a very short piece of tape. So when I have to,
good.
So a lot of times I'll read the script, and all right, I don't get exactly what's written there, but I get the gist of it across. Whereas it was so funny working with Cheryl Blaylock. She was so good at being able to know all her lines and all of Batley's lines and all of Magellan's lines, like a real person. So
she's so great.
Yeah, they say Batley. They wrote that. Oh look, Batley goes. Oh look up there, the sky. Look what a beautiful shade of blue it is. And I would say during the take, oh look, wow, the sky looks amazing. Cheryl would be lost because she had to take that moment. Like, what is Jim saying? What is he saying? So it took a while, but to me, I was never also a rehearser for the sake of getting lines right. I was more like a technical rehearser. I want to get the camera guys, because we shot all of Eureka's Castle live 3-camera cutting, which is the way it all used to be done. Now it's all, it's the way they do it now. You can't find directors that are comfortable enough to do. They run 3 or 4 videotape or computer machines now to film from every camera angle, and they go in and edit it later. And we were always explaining to them, as puppeteers, if you cut to my close-up, I have to cheat the head this way because the camera's at that angle, because the puppet is so important. So I said, you can't. So when we were first starting to do Bear in the Big Blue House, Tyler Bunch, another brilliant actor.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
Just you can't say enough about Tyler and his abilities.
Absolutely.
But something he wasn't used to was the 3-camera cut. So they would cut to his character, and either he didn't anticipate it and stuff. So I was telling him, I would tell him little things. I didn't know Tyler from anyone, but I was just blurted out. Wait for your cut. If you miss it, take a beat, set your eye focus. They'll tighten it up in post, and they'll make a note of that. They'll do that because it's so important. You don't want to see the character. You cut to his close-up, and he has to adjust on camera. Basically, there's ways of cheating that. Like I used to say to performers who had a hard time with that, play the room your right part of the time. So, because it's very hard to lock in your focus to the camera unless you're really good at it. And a lot of times, because you're looking at your script, it's easy to drift it.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, he play the character and he's listening and he's doing things. I mean, not to
Little
the
movements, yeah.
that he's, you know, on a sugar high or something, but aids of. I mean, when I first got hired for a Bear in the Boo House, I was just brought in because Tyler and Peter had double the characters, and they were always putting all the characters in. So Peter and Tyler would do the dialogue live, and I would animate Pip and Pop, sometimes both of them at the same time. And it was probably from doing years of commercial work where everything's pre-recorded, even the stuff that even if I was doing the voice, you're just anticipating all the lip sync. So there's a cheat you can do to anticipate and hit the lip sync. When somebody else is doing the voice off camera. So that was kind of like how I got into Bear.
Nice.
And Noel making a point, getting them to hire.
Yes.
Yeah,
of course.
and it's ironic because since we're talking about Bear, it's ironic because you get to double for the Otters, and then you get your own Otter character
Yeah,
later on.
Yeah, Otter, yeah. And Jeremiah and Ferret, Jeter, and
and Grandpa, I love playing old characters, and to me, it's just I think I think what I loved about it was I always felt Bear. A lot of the characters were, were already high octane, so I tend when I'm on a show, if I see a lot of high octane characters already there, I'm going to go the other way, and it'll make my character unique. So if I'm doing Jeremiah, just weird little things you can do like that. That
yeah.
are great puppetry moments.
Such a funny character.
Yes.
Ad-libbing or whatever, and then sometimes I get in trouble for what I was ad-libbing because it was like not necessarily appropriate, but it was funny as it could be and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was yeah, I like playing old characters. I mean,
Yeah, one of my favorite characters you did on Bear actually was a one-off character, only appeared in one episode, if you remember this character called Benny the Bat.
oh yeah,
Yeah, love that character.
yeah, he was
Yeah.
the baseball player. Yeah.
Right.
That
Yeah.
that was Ferret Jeter. Benny
Oh,
the Bat. So there's like
Benny the Bat.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's this like whole episode where everyone's like afraid of this bat, and then
Right.
and then they learn that
Yeah.
Trilo's friends with him, and then
right.
they do that bat dance song or
Bad
whatever.
dance, yeah. Yes.
And it was
Yeah.
why we decided we're just going to so do it because I mean Bear was very similar voice to Magellan.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the Bat, I'm going to slip into Batley doing it. So it was kind of like this weird,
Okay.
like a
Gotcha.
a reunion thing. You had Magellan and Batley phase 2 on Bear and the Big Blue House.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go. So
Voila.
absolutely. So another Nickelodeon show that you worked on was Gullah Gullah Island, where you got to do some building for that, and you also performed Chansum the Pelican on that. So what was Gullah like?
That was an interesting show. I mean, they hired us. It was the same. It was a couple of the producers broke away when we did Eureka's Castle from Noyes and Laborn and started their own company. Or actually, it was just one. It was Kathy Minton and Maria Perez, our friend, formed this company to do this
Yeah.
show. And it was it was based on this couple, Ron and Natalie, from the Gullah area. And I guess it's either South or North Carolina. It might be North Carolina. Might be South. I don't remember offhand. But it's an actual real thing. And they used to do this live show based upon Gullah myths and stuff. So in the beginning, the puppet that was going to be on it was this mythical creature, furry thing. And Chuck Fawcett and Animax down in at that time Tennessee built this thing, and they did a test pilot, and it didn't go well. So from that, they went with the frog, and they contacted us about building this body puppet frog for this guy. And the guy they hired, Philip, I can't think of his last name, but he was a break dancer. He wasn't a puppeteer at all. So so they wanted to build this puppet that he could do his breakdancing things in. So we were like, yeah, okay. So meanwhile, we just built a good puppet. You know, he had a double trigger in his hand, kind of like the Sesame Street Live things where they can control their mouths, but he could also control these huge pop open eyes he had on his head.
Yeah. Philip Garcia. Yeah.
Yeah, right, Garcia, right. And so he was like a deer in a headlights because we made and then there's so many funny things that happened at the beginning of this thing. We went down to Florida. We had designed and built the puppet in New York. They were down at Nickelodeon Studios, Universal Studios, and they were putting up the set, doing this stuff. So the first time they saw the puppet was finished was down in Florida. I went down and was going to work with Philip about figuring out again shtick and things he could do. He didn't really speak. They wanted to be more like gibberish noise, and occasionally an identifiable word or something. So we get down there, and we had already sent police samples because the lighting guy should see what he's going to be, and he's going to be this bright yellow frog. So we get down to Nickelodeon, and we bring the puppet out. Philip's in the puppet, not with the head on, just the body. And we bring it out onto the set, and I look, and like the main set, Natalie's living room and stuff, is painted bright yellow. Like if you wanted to match Binya, you've succeeded. It was like the perfect exact color. So they're looking at the monitor, and everybody's talking. So I can see this big huddle with the set designer, and he comes over to us and he goes, "What would it take to recover the puppet?" I looked at him. I said, No. Puppet's made. You were sent a piece of his fleece, a rather large piece. I said, I would get yourself some paint and a couple of brushes and a bucket and get to work. So they had to change the whole scenery because it was the weirdest thing. I thought, why would you ever design this bright yellow thing? So anyway, so that was the first thing that happened weird the first week we were down there. So I'm working with Philip in a rehearsal studio with a camera set up. So because Philip didn't wear a monitor inside, he could see out, and we'd put big floor monitors everywhere so he could steal a peek. He could see out when the mouth was open, but in the mouth, the whole big gullet thing down here had all these orange like spots and stuff. Those are all trim, so he could see out all over the place and do his thing. And we worked out the voice thing, all this crazy like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we worked with him for a bunch of days, and we bring him out on the set, get him all in the head and everything, and he's doing this business stuff. And you see all these producers standing around, they're looking at it, and they're like, they're saying, this isn't working. This is not what we want. I said, well, what do you mean it's not working? He says, well, he's like a big character, a doll. He says, this is a reality-based show. I said, so this has to be done in thinking that way. I said, they got a 200-pound frog sitting in their living room. I said, this is a reality-based show? I said, this is a show that this is a character on. I said, get over that. No one's going to believe that this is a real frog hopping around if that's what you're going for. And they were like, "Oh, okay, all right, it'll be fine." So, but the poor and the worst part was when they did it in front of me and Philip had the head off, and I could see the color drain out of his face, like his eyes, like all this work for the last 5 days, and they're hating every moment of it because it's too character driven. And I said, he's a character. So anyway. So from that, the second season, I got to do Chanson, which was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And his whole thing was that whole puppet because they wanted a lot of sound effects. So they brought Fred Newman in to work with me, and I've known Fred for years. And Fred was like, "What am I going to teach you?" I said, "I don't know, Fred, but let's have a good time. We'll go have some dinner somewhere. Don't worry about it." So this is one thing I could always do, and my dad could always do it, and it was this. See if I can do it now. And my kid can do it. So it's just blowing air through your cheeks. And where I got it from, besides my dad, there was a character on the Bowery Boys. Hunts Hall played Satch, and he was kind of a character. And whenever he had the thing, he'd go, So I said, so that's where the whole waddle thing. Whenever he did the shook his head, it was a type of thing. So it was kind of a interesting uh, show to work on because it wasn't heavy chanson, which I really liked. It when he was in. It was fun. But then we were always trying weird little special effects, and it was all practical. We used to do the mirror tricks. Like Chanson would be sitting on a wheelbarrow, and if you looked under the wheelbarrow, you realize I'm being hidden only because we have a 45-degree mirror reflecting the grass that's in front of me up. So it's hiding me, and it looks like you're looking straight through the wheelbarrow because you know um, it's like the old magician's tricks. They use the mirrors to with striped painted boxes to hide things. Well, that was hiding me. I was there and I'm working the puppet up on the edge of the wheelbarrow like this. So
There you go.
Yeah. Another wonderful show. I mean, Go On was another great show, and of course, for having the show to kind of like have the like a parents and how the kids kind of like a camaraderie show like that for Nick Jr. I think it was such a wonderful thing, and of course, you got a child with one of the kids, Shanna Freeman Gonzalez. She's absolutely wonderful, and for you that like because both me and Chris kind of noticed from your interview with Puppeteer, so wonderful, late Kruger and Kim and Garrity. I saw that you actually still have the Binya Binya head, which that's pretty cool.
yeah, I was working. I brought it in for someone to see the triggers and stuff on it and stuff. But it's so fun
Oh, okay.
to have them. But
Right.
Castle puppets and Binya Binya, all the Scott foam has deteriorated to the point where
Right.
puppet just kind of crushes in. I mean,
Yeah, just kind of like that when it's happening for a lot of years, it just kind of starts to
yeah,
goes to toast
yeah,
term.
shake it and there's sawdust, all these toast crack, crumbs come pouring out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
it happens like that.
I have puppets from. I mean, all right, they're not used as much as say on a show, but I do have urethane puppets I made back in high school that are still okay. The urethane, the
Oh,
ure
wow.
Wow,
used a lot.
crazy.
We also we could extend the life of our puppets. We were also sticklers on after every day of shooting, all the Eureka's castle puppets had cold air blown up through them until they were dry. If you leave the moisture in there, that I think speeds along all the decaying of the foam, and wasn't great for the mechs either. We would also dry them out so the mechs wouldn't. Sometimes they start squeaking. And I'd spray a little silicone spray in a cup, and I'd take a paintbrush and I'd go in and just touch the axle to get some silicone on there, and it would stop squeaking. But again, back then we used welding rods for everything. They're copper coated and they weren't supposed to rust, but they did. So now we use stainless steel. Try to avoid things like that. But I still, they used to sell this stuff. I'll tell you a funny story. They sold this stuff back then. Elmer's sold it. It was called Elmer's Slide All, and it was a spray can, and you sprayed on like the window frames and stuff to make your windows slide nice or whatever, and it was spraying Teflon. Now it's probably horrible to breathe in, and maybe that was ultimately the demise of it. But they took it off the market; it disappeared. But we used it all the time on the mechs because the Teflon is white. Even if it got on the eye, it was still white. It didn't cause any issues. So it wasn't on the market for many years, and then suddenly I saw it again in the store. We were building all the puppets for Johnny and the Sprites for Disney. So
Love that show.
Another wonderful show. Yeah, another wonderful show too. They got to perform Seymour.
yeah,
that character.
Character Basil had wild eyes. His eyes would do
Tim Nagasi got to perform that. Yeah, wonderful puppeteer too.
I see in the store they brought back Slide All, and we used to put it inside the wild eyes all the time because it would just let there's pads in there, but if you can get that stuff on the pads, so I take his finished eyes and I spray it on to the eyeball and let it drip in, and it totally just dissolves all the paint, destroys the eyeballs.
Oh, wow.
Whatever the solvent replaced, and then looking at it, it says spray it on your your window frames, and I'm thinking, well, what if they're painted? You're gonna have
Gosh.
yes. It was, and then it disappeared again. I don't think, but it, you know, so I had to rebuild his eyes, make a new set of eyes for him when he was first.
Wow.
Wow.
You
Yeah,
learn.
of course,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And of course, wonderful John Tartaglia and Leslie and Tim and Heather and
Carmen.
Carmen. Yeah, wonderful puppeteers. I mean, wonderful show.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun working on that one too. We had Laura Brock doing the sets again. She did Between the Lines.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
it was kind of like, and I worked with Johnny. I got along really well with Johnny when we
Yeah,
were
it's great.
Webberless World of Dr. Seuss. He was in
Right.
he was a kid then, and he
Yeah.
and
One
he
of the
was
younger puppeteers in Sesame Street, like when he started working, he was like 16, 15
yeah.
at
Now
the
he's
time.
a producer. He does all these cruise line shows and
Yeah, back to her Frog Walk, Back to Her Walk, and he's done wonderful things for
Yeah,
Henson.
yeah, and he just got done doing like the Frozen Broadway show too. I think that was kind of like one of the newer things
Yeah.
he did. Yeah, he's
yeah.
Uh-huh.
crazy
Well,
talented.
it's nice
Wonderful guy.
puppet guy to deal with puppet situations. Whereas in the, sometimes they don't do that. They bring in a guy who's never worked with puppets before, and it's like, well, that's a quick learning curve you need, pal, because it's
Yeah.
totally a different world. So
Yeah. So in between a lot of these projects, you've also gotten to do some work with Sesame Street, as we've talked a little bit about, where you've gotten to, you know, work in the shop and also puppeteer some background characters. What was getting to work on, such an iconic show like?
yeah, it was kind of I was what it was. I'd done I got hired to work on the Muppets Take Manhattan. I was working at Kermit's shop still, and I auditioned, and they only needed one puppeteer, and Frank decided to go with Bruce Hall because he was small, and they figured they can stick Bruce into all the tight holes that the bigger guys who were all like 6'3" or whatever can't get into. So I was kind of like a little disappointed, but they said, "Oh, there'll be some work for you." But Jim apparently really liked me, so Jim was like, "Let's hire this one too." So I got to work on the whole film, and to me, there wasn't anything better at that time for me than to sit there and just watch the experts, the
Oh
guy
yeah. Yeah.
group, Richard. Got close to Richard. Met David Rudman for the first time. He was hired also.
Right, because he was kind of new to the game there too.
Dave Goltz, and Frank, and it was kind of like interesting because I'd worked with them, with some coffee breaker films they were making and stuff like that. So I didn't really, you sort of like you're that guy, the new young kid. So you sort of sit there, even on Sesame Street. I was never off the set. I was always on set because I wasn't always working, but I would watch Jim and Frank. You might as well learn what you can from the experts, and you couldn't get much higher experts than Jim and Frank or Richard or Jerry or on Sesame Street. So it was interesting to be on the movie because it was like a different sort of like relationship. You got to be a little more buddy with people, um, and it was like it was a good time. It was a very good time, and it was a good film too. I really thought it was a well done film. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
and that's how I got into Sesame Street. Jim told me you're going to get a call work on Sesame Street. So I was called in for one bit the first day I went in, and I ended up because I would just always be on the set. Jim would say, "Oh, grab another puppet and let's stick another puppet in." So I ended up working practically on every bit. Um, some of it just doing Jim's right hand. And I wasn't very good at right hands. It's one of those things that people say, "Oh, you start out doing right hands because you're not ready to do a puppet." I was just the opposite. I was so used to doing the whole puppet that all of a sudden, for me to do right hands, I had never done it before. And especially you're doing Ernie's right hand. And my hand was so tiny that they had to put, like, I wore another glove on my hand and then stuck it inside Ernie's hand. Because it was just looked like a bag. It looked like, what happened to Ernie's, right hand? It looks like there's no flesh in there. It's just a bag. But it was interesting because not so much with Jim, but Richard would take you under his wing, if you will, and clue you in right away what to do, weird little things. Like hook Jim's belt buckle with your finger or his belt loop on the back of his pants. And then when he turns, you're always being, in a sense, dragged around with him. Then you can anticipate when he goes to do something. I had one of these wonderful moments with Jim Henson. We were doing this bit. It was just Ernie. Bert wasn't in there, and Ernie's reading a book, and he's decided. Oh no, Bert was in bed sleeping, I think. So Ernie couldn't sleep, so he decides to read a book, and no, screwing it all up. There was no Bert. Ernie decides to listen to the radio. So Jim is doing with his left hand, turning on the radio, and he'd say, "Well, this is a great song. I'm going to play it really loud." Oh, I know what Bert would say now. And then Jim would go to the other side of the radio, and he'd go, and Ernie doing his Bert imitation, "What are you doing with that radio so loud?" And Jim would reach up and turn off with the left hand, turn the radio down. And it was this back and forth, back and forth. And then at the payoff of the bit was Ernie would say, "Well, really?" Bert would just say, "Turn off the radio." And he was supposed to reach up and turn off the radio. And then he was going to bring a book up and start reading a book. So instead of like making noise and waking Bert up because he's sleeping in the next room or something, there was some sort of reason for it. So in the rehearsal, I'm doing the right hand, just basic gesturing. But in my left hand, I have the prop book. So Jim says, when I reach down for the prop book, just put it in my hand. So in the rehearsal, it was fine. He reached down when he had to, and he came up with it, and it was fine. For whatever reason, he reached down, and he wanted the book, and I handed it to him, but he hadn't turned the radio off yet. And he's delivering the last line of dialogue. Well, I know what Bert would say, "Turn off that radio." So I reach up with the right hand and turn off the radio, and then Jim brings the book up, and we open the book, and he starts reading it, and that's the end of the bit. So I actually apologized to Jim. I said, "I'm sorry I did that, but you reached down." I said, "I knew you couldn't turn." He goes, "Oh, no problem. I knew you would be there." Like,
Yeah, that's Jim for you.
it's Jim Henson. You don't want to do anything wrong, and you don't want to step on his toes.
Right.
But he was a very, super receptive guy, and again, obviously super stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Versatile.
And that was season 15 on Sesame, so that's how long ago I started on Sesame.
Oh wow. Nice.
That's crazy.
So now what was the Great Space Coaster like?
Oh, well, that was back when that I never actually worked on the show, but we built the puppets at Kermit's shop. So that was these two guys,
Gotcha.
Sunbow Productions. I can't think of their name, but they had this idea. They did a lot of animation shows, so this was their going into puppet shows. And at the time, building a show at Kermit's for Dance in America called The Spellbound Child. Was based upon a ballet that was done with the New York City Ballet, and it was a televised version of it, so we could do all these puppet effects in it. There was a lot of fantasy world, the kid shrinks down, and all the dragonflies are dancers and stuff, and then we built mechanical dress. So there was a lot of interesting stuff there. But we were working on that, and Kermit wanted me to work on the performance of that as one of the puppeteers. We shot it down at the Great Ole Opry, which was fun. So when Great Space Coaster came up, he said I won't say he hated it, but he had nothing good to say about it other than it was a great job. That the characters would be great, but he felt like the two guys and what they want to do with the show and the scripts and everything were terrible. So he says, don't even bother. It'll never go anywhere. And of course, then they end up doing like 5 seasons of it. Everybody worked on it except me, but it was fine. But I built MT Promises on that, and Baffle, that little alien character that they added after like the first, second, or third season, somewhere in there. But yeah, that was with Kermit's shop, though. That was actually one of the first shows. Most of the time, it's Kermit's shop. We were building international Sesame Street stuff, and these little films, and the occasional commercial. We did the first Snuggle commercials were done there. The Wise Owl, Did some Glidden paint commercials and stuff. And it was, you know, again, I was, you know, when I started working there, I was 18, you know, 19 maybe, something like that. So it was like eye opening, you know, and in every respect, because I had done tons of video stuff. My high school, I went to Southampton High School, out in Southampton, Long Island, and we had a color TV studio in Southampton High School. And I basically had the keys to it. And we used to go in and do puppet films. So I was so versed with television and editing, and it was all there, never getting used. I used to do, I was the guy, if teachers wanted to do a tape to show in the class, we would shoot it for them, but we'd also jazz it up with some puppet moments or something, you know, just to entertain the kids, a la Sesame Street, you know. So I learned a lot from high school about television. In fact, that's what I almost went into, because nobody knew where to send me for puppetry. You know, it never occurred to them, you know, theater or whatever. And I actually went to Pratt. So here's a funny story. So when I went to Pratt, I was a senior in high school, not to see Pratt. Pratt was having a college day there. I was actually going there to see, there were all different colleges there. I was going to see, I think, NYU, and there was maybe a couple other schools, to go into talk about television production schools, you know, and then when I went to Pratt, first thing you go in, they ask you questions, what you're into. And my mother, being the outspoken mom she said, he's a puppeteer. He loves puppets. He does puppets. They go, oh, you really, Pratt, you know, you ever think of going to Pratt? Kermit Love teaches here. And I knew the name. And I was like, really? I said, so my guidance counselors in high school, never even occurred to them to send me to a theater school to learn puppet theater, you know, type of stuff. And I guess UConn probably had their program going in, or maybe it was just starting up. Never knew about it till, you know, years later. I was like, well, I could have went to UConn, but, you know, it didn't happen either. So, you know, it all happens for a reason. Ended up with a job after 4 years, you know, so, and then that went on for another 40 some odd years. So
There you go.
Right.
it done.
Yeah.
It's done. Just be that guy.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So now kind of like moving on to the other series that you got to build puppets. So now, so both with Whimsy's House and Barney and Friends. So what went into, you know, your involvement in both of those series?
All right, so like we got a call from Barney, the people that were shooting Barney then, they wanted to add hand puppets. So we went, I guess they came up at first, see our shop, and they were interesting. They kind of gave us a lot of freedom to just come up. They wanted a bird character, a lady bird.
Yeah, Miss Etta, yeah.
Yeah.
Etta, that was
Miss Etta, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh, Etiquette. That was the joke there. I think her last name was Kit Etiquette.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Well, anyway, and then there was the little brown squirrel. I can't think of his name either.
Scooter.
Scooter McNutty.
Yeah. Very funny character.
Version.
Yes. That's all Duffy.
Both had IMAX. I know Scooter had pop open lids. That was the type of thing we did back then. We, you know, whether or not they necessarily wanted them, we would say, well, you know, you should really have them because they give you so much more expression and stuff. So we built these puppets, and we went to, they were shooting outside of Dallas, Texas, near the airport, some studio there. And I got to try Barney on. They had me try Barney on.
Right.
But Barney weighed 76 pounds, and it all sits on your shoulders. So
just one like whole tires. It's not like parts. It's just all of it.
It's
even
like
the head. It's all of it.
Well, that was the other thing. When they came to talk to us about the hand puppets, they actually asked us about, like, you know, working on Barney, because, you know, there's always complaints, and the guy that's inside of it,
David Joyner, yeah,
wishes there was more movement stuff. So we were trying to get them to, like, separate the head from the body so that you get some of this happening, or any of this kind of a thing happening on his head. They were scared to change anything on Barney,
right,
that the kids wouldn't recognize it as Barney still, that we ended up not doing any. And then the guy working the mouth, there was a 1/2-inch stainless steel bar here that they would wrap a fresh sponge on with a couple.
Yep, to basically bite down to every syllable.
Yeah.
See, if it's like down, like Jordan, whoever who's inside Barney, and whoever your performer is, they won't see, except if it's not closed down from from the bar. And
Like, first off, I just thought, wow, how can you? Because you watch the show, and he
I
was a
know.
character, man. It was just like, he's spinning around and lip syncing at top speed, and I'm thinking, man, I would.
Whole 360s and bell kicks and all that. David Jordan, he's a crazy performer.
Yeah, yeah, and he was so funny.
Jim
And
Barney, oh my
you know,
goodness.
I met him. We did a
And Bob West, the voice, yeah, it's
we
great.
did a commercial for it must have been for PBS, but we shot it out in California. Had all the characters there, so we went out with the Lions characters. It was like
Oh wow.
so. So I walk up to him, and it's like there's a lot of kids and stuff around. So I want to say hi to him, and what was the guy's name? Is in the suit?
David Joyner.
David. I just say, hey, David, it's Jim, and you hear this little voice go, "It's Barney when I'm in the suit." Because there were kids around, and I'm talking to Barney. I'm talking to the guy in Barney, and
Oh my gosh.
I'm thinking, well, the kids can't handle that. Here's half a lion here with a guy sticking his hand up inside the, lying on the floor. I said, do the kids not notice that? What's the worry? But yeah, talk about like an impossibly hard job that he did an amazing work with.
Yeah, like the 10 years doing it. Such an incredible job.
Literally like a football player, though. He's a very big, strong.
Yeah.
But anyway,
and to compare, Kamara from both David Jordan and Bob West doing Barney. I mean, of course, a great show, but how the way Jordan and West did to do Barney together, from down sync to the voice and all that, from movements, it's insane. No one can top that.
Especially when there's like songs and he has to like dance while biting down on the bar. It's crazy.
Yeah, and choreograph and every syllable, like
yeah,
I try to think
crazy.
held up. You would think,
like what?
But so the hand puppets. So we built the hand puppets. The first two we did the bird and we did the squirrel.
Yeah, and Scooter, yeah.
And then we like the following season we added the bookworm that was in
Booker T bookworm, yeah.
But the first, it was funny. So we made these puppets. I went down there and I was to train the puppeteers because they said that they're not really television puppeteers.
Yeah, Todd, Bryce, Earl Fisher, yeah.
So I meet the guy, and he's done puppets, but he's done mostly stage work with them. So he had a pretty good puppeteer, but again, the trick keeping your head out of the shot and doing this stuff. And
right.
Who they raved about, the most perfect little voice and this, that, and the other thing. Because I thought they'd hire a female puppeteer, for the bird, for Miss Edda, and it was this guy who, when I met him, he's this guy who had to be in his 70s, and he had zero strength in his arms. So he put the puppet up, and I was showing them how to, play. They were looking at monitors, and I would set up the shot, and as he was performing, the puppet would sink down to the point where he was holding the puppet like right here with this much of his head in the shot, and he's
right
and still doing his lines. And I'm going, do you see what's going on? Are you watching the monitor? I said, none of this is usable. I said, it's not usable when this much of your head is in the shot. If I'm down on your chest because you're working the puppet here, because that's the comfortable spot. So the guy couldn't do it. And his voice, it was fun. He was doing like a voice like that,
right.
I mean, I said, aren't they having any? They apparently couldn't find a young girl puppeteer strong with the voice that they liked and all stuff. So anyway, what they ended up doing, if you ever noticed her in the show, she's always in a window because they built a little shelf he could rest his elbow on.
Right, from the treehouse, yeah.
And she never left.
So cool.
Because of that. I was like, okay.
Like that's her spot. Don't orient that spot, and that's it. That's where she's gonna go at.
Yeah, the check cleared. It's fine with me. That's great. Wonderful. Yeah, so we did those, and I forget who I wonder if the same kid who did the squirrel ended up doing the worm. Was he the same puppeteer?
No. I'm Scooter McKnight. That was Todd Duffy and Booker T, who also, to those who know previous cast, who was more like kind of voiceover person who did like voiceover stuff for Hit Entertainment and Lyric Studios and the voice of Pasquale.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, he was the one who performed
Yeah,
Booker T. And I remember he was like during our chat with him, he was like kind of like I remember I met that one puppet guy and it was something like so. And I met and we kind of like mentioned you, and it's like you know it could have been that because that makes more sense. You're just kind of that person, puppet person,
I
kind of like
don't
involved in that around that time.
I don't remember having any major issues with that. I thought he was fine. Um, but the coolest thing about where they shot Barney though was it was a film studio outside of
Yeah,
literally right by the airport, and this whole one like the main room, the main I want to call it the space when you walk in was filled with props from films that were shot there. Like they had the giant sneakers from Honey, I Grew the Kid. Remember that scene with the end when the kid is like gigantic walking down the street? So they
yeah,
put
I'm sure. Yeah,
sneakers that I guess they could shoot practical, the low stuff. And there was like all these amazing props and stuff from films you knew. And I said, oh, they must have shot scenes here. And so whoever was running that studio, had a little side thing going on, and they had tours all the time and everything. But the Barney thing, they were crazy protective. And what was really cool about Barney was Barney. If you ever look at any of the Barney puppets, they were built out of like 6 different colors: orange, purple, green.
right. To kind of make it a little colorful on the designs, which
But
makes
what
sense.
the smart thing about that was when they had their fleece manufactured, because they were all covered in the Antron fleece, they manufactured it in the color. So it was perfect. Because what happens with Antron fleece, when you dye it, it gets all knotty looking and you got to clean it and restore it and shave it and do all this stuff to it. They had bolts and bolts of this stuff. It looked like a carpet store with rolls of carpeting hanging on the walls of all the fleeces. And the stuff was gorgeous. And it didn't have to be dyed. It was already dyed. When we were there, they were just gearing up to start on. They had the Barney movie. When they made the Barney movie, they had to make like
Yeah, Great Adventure. Yeah.
yeah. So
We're all like kind of like main cast and the kid, yeah, main performers, main and voice actors kind of went to Canada to do that while they have like secondary voice actors and body performers doing the rest of the episodes while they just doing the movie, right?
right. So it was an interesting thing. So what was the other thing? So it was Barney. What was the other thing we worked on?
And Whimsy's house.
Oh, Whimsy's house. Yeah, that was interesting. That what we had prior to Whimsy's house, we had done Groundling Marsh for
Yeah, right. Yeah, I love that show. Yeah.
Canadian. Um,
Yeah, Gore Robertson.
and through them, yeah, Gordy worked on that. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that was the weird. They were like the worst producers to work for. I won't mention names, but oh my god,
Right.
I work with John Orberg. He's the nicest guy. I've never seen John May. I literally thought he was going to strangle one of the producers, and then we realized they would come to New York and they would go and have what I would call a liquid lunch because he would come back and his eyes would literally be bloodshot, and he was just like belligerent and it was questioning
Oh
everything.
gosh.
And it was like, so anyway, we show up in that was shot in Toronto. Yeah, that was shot in Toronto. So we show up in Toronto with all the puppets. I walk in, and all the sets for some reason are not raised. So we're like, I mean, they're built really tall, but the detail of the sets are all low, almost to the floor. And
Oh,
but worked on this thing, worked on Fraggle Rock, and I'm like, well, why is this done this way? But anyway,
Yeah.
so we get there and we're supposed to again work with the puppeteers, help I guess set up the puppet shop that'll maintain the puppets because we weren't going to do it. And it's like they couldn't be it was like they couldn't be bothered with this, right? So they finally said, look, come back after lunch. And this is like, it's like 9 o'clock in the morning. They said, come back after lunch, get here around 1, and we'll start dealing with you guys. We're dealing with so many other things right now. So we're like, fine. So
Right.
I'm there with Matt Started. John didn't go. John refused. John didn't want to deal with these people again. So John stayed in New York running the shop, and Matt went with me. So Matt's like, well, we're in Toronto. What do you want to do? I said, I don't know. I've never been to the Hockey Hall of Fame. So we go over to the Hockey Hall of Fame. We spend the morning at the Hockey Hall of Fame. We go get some lunch. We show up at the studio they wanted us there at 1. We show up like 1:45. They come running up to us, PAs and everyone. They are like spit flying, screaming at us. Where were you? Why weren't you here? This
Oh no.
we're like, we got sent away, told to be back here at 1. And I said, and it's only 12:45. So if you don't change your tone, I'm walking out and I'll be back in 15 minutes. So they went, things are crazy. I said, and don't go crazy on me. I did exactly what you wanted us. So anyway, we ended up, dealing with these people. We were up there like a handful of days, and the show was okay. They had, for a group they had so many people on there that worked on Fraggle Rock, you would never know it by the production problems they had. I mean, you kind of go like, well, geez, dudes, look, everything you did here on this set is wrong. The puppets are held up over your heads, right? Why is the best part of the set to the floor? For the first 4 feet, you're never going to see, or 5 feet, So anyway, so we did that. So through them, we got in touch with the group. They were an animation house, husband and wife, in Quebec, and they were producing Wimsie's house.
Right.
They gave us a Bible. It had drawings. Basically, the gist of this was it was a husband who was a dragon, and he married a bird, and they had kids, dragons, and had birds. So they had some drawings done. We cleaned them up. Matt did some magic to them, made them more puppet friendly and puppety and stuff. And they were actually pretty nice people to work with. So this show got shot, and it was the art direction on this show was really cool. It was very retro and very different, and nothing was square. Everything was slightly off. The doorways were crooked and stuff. It had a really cool look to it. Some of the puppeteers were real pieces of work. They hired a lot of. They kind of the original concept of this show. So let me get this clear. You have to listen to this real straight.
Yes.
It was going to be written in English, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the ideal thing they wanted to do was to hire English-speaking puppeteers, American puppeteers that are already. They wanted this to be the best puppet show ever, and hire all these American puppeteers, and we would shoot it, and then they would dub it into French because it's Quebec, and
Right.
then they would dub, and then they had their English version, and then they would dub it into whatever. They wouldn't do like Fraggle Rock, basically be able to dub
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Mhm.
Great, okay. Well, the money from it was all government funds, gifts, grants, whatever. So the government said, no way. You're not bringing in, English-speaking puppeteers from the United States. You have to use French-speaking puppeteers. So what they ended up doing, and there were people that wrote on this show were all Americans. I won't mention names because maybe they weren't supposed to be doing it, but they were associated with Sesame Street. They would write the show in English, translate it into French, shoot it in French, and then translate it back to English to show it in the United States.
Yeah.
Loop the whole thing back into English. So anyway, that's what they ended up having to do, which, I budget-wise, I just think, well, all right, whatever. So make a long story short, when that show came out, it was like a big hit at Toy Fair and stuff like that. And Henson at the time was in the process of selling, this is after Jim had died and everything, to Hit Entertainment. And somebody felt that the characters were like a ripoff of Fraggle Rock. Like they really looked like the Fraggle Rock characters. So ended up suing husband and wife, who are
Right.
I think I remember reading that
Yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
that there was like a
I might
lawsuit
remember
with
that
Whimsy's
too.
house. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I remember that.
So
I remember reading
but
about
if you went by the contract, and this is something our lawyer missed, it gave us full responsibility for any legal actions against the characters, blah, 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 which were all based upon their original drawing. So Henson ended up suing 3 Design Studio, and I had to go in and give this crazy deposition. And basically, they were just trying to nail us with this thing. So we had a good lawyer. We had this guy Adolf Seltzer. He was a great lawyer. He was actually a children's book writer too, which I always thought was so funny because literally looked like remember Lou Grant, Mary Tyler Moore's boss on the Lou Grant on Mary Tyler Moore, or he looked like a bulldog. Let me put it this way: he just had this great look about him. But he was a no nonsense guy. So when we gave the deposition, we had to hire him to be there. And he had to instruct me to give just yes and no answers, where I tend to elaborate on things. So after a day of giving a deposition, I go back to the shop and the phone rings. And it's their lawyer. I forget her name. Can't think of her names. Anyway, she calls me at my shop. And she says, "Why didn't you just admit it, Jim? You guys just went ahead and ripped off the Fraggle Rock characters and blah, blah, blah." I said, "Because we didn't." I said, it's totally different characters. She says, "Well, we could just drag this on and on and on and on and put you out of business that way." Like basically bankrupt because we have to have the lawyer and all the fees and everything. So anyway, I called our lawyer up and talk about unethical. My lawyer goes nuts. He's like, "Are they kidding? Why do they don't get it to do that?" He says, so he was our lawyer for the rest of this thing, gratis, no fee. He says, "We're going to kick their ass." He says, "This is ridiculous." I said, "They just sound desperate to me." So anyway, make a long story short, what we had to agree to was we weren't allowed to use ostrich plume for hair. You know how the Muppets use ostrich plume for hair on the characters?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but the joke of that is none of our characters have ostrich plume. What we do is we buy those Halloween wigs with the long, short, stubby fibers, and we cut out all the fibers and we make little plugs and we put them in all over. We make our own wigs that way, or we enhance fur by putting them in. So they do move, but they don't move like a feather at all. So so you wanted me to sign a piece of paper that said, "Hey, no feathers? Fine. We don't use feathers for that very reason, because we know Henson had feathers on. I mean, the Sesame Street characters, they all have, plumes that, move around and stuff like that. That's their look. My argument when we were giving the deposition was 3 Design doesn't want to be confused with the Jim Henson puppets. How does that help us? We want to be known for our look. And we don't use, velour pupils we use shiny buttons, so the eyes kick. We try to make it as different as possible. I said, unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, when we would get a phone call, first thing out of a potential client's mouth would be, "We'd like a Muppet." We don't build Muppets. We can build you a puppet, but we don't build Muppets. No, sorry, we can't build you a Muppet. So you sort of have to clarify it. So anyway, it was fine. And actually, then the joke was when it was all over, I actually went to the wrap party or the premiere party for Muppets from Space. So I'm sitting there with
Okay. That's
we're
cool.
having like beer, and he goes, I'm really sorry about the whole thing, but the legal wants to clear out all the problems, and he says, "I know you guys don't do this stuff," and I said, yeah, I said, lawyers do what lawyers do. I said, I don't like my own lawyer for that reason, but I get it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. So it was kind of funny to hang a beer with the guy, or he wasn't suing us. It wasn't anything personal, but the really amazing thing, that the outcome of this whole story is the husband and wife, and the name of the company, it had a bear with stars over it. They produced the Beetlejuice cartoon series. I want to say
Novana? Was it
Nelvana.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
They were the husband and wife team. The government found out they were embezzling money that was supposed to be just spent on the production, and apparently, I think they got prison time. They got that's what happened to them. So,
Right. I think I did.
Wow.
I remember reading something about that too. There's a huge lawsuit with them. Yeah.
money around with government money. It's meant for producing.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like
Right.
if you spend it, and they were spending it on themselves. It was like skimming off the top. So anyway, we thought, well, there's justice for you. There we go. We put a slap on the hand. They're in prison. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
but a very good show. I don't know if any of them are available.
Yeah.
But the look, I don't know.
I mean, there are episodes on YouTube, and I actually do have a Whimsy's House DVD too. I mean, that's the only one that came out, but I mean, there are things that's Whimsy's House that's out there, so people can just watch it, just to give it a
Yeah.
watch, to see how it is. But
The puppetry suffered on that show because a lot of the people on that show were just theater puppetry people. And when I came in to help train them by this one producer who actually used to work on Sesame Street in New York, she was she was both Canadian and she had dual citizenships. They didn't even want to deal with me, these puppeteers. They would say, yes, Jim, we know. Slow down. Yeah, I know. Yes.
oh god,
So I took her aside. I said, hey, every shoot has one. You've got two on this shoot. Good luck.
oh god,
They don't want to learn.
Yeah.
I'm done.
gosh.
It's fine.
There you go. So
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, going back to Barney briefly, I mean, before we're talking about a little bit between the lines, I mean, of course, Scooter and Miss
Booker T.
Booker T. Yeah, I mean, those puppets were wonderful builds
Oh yeah.
during their time on the show. I mean, it's so great too that when usual with the show is usually is the dinos and the kids, but like for having that show's franchise to have that opportunity to have that let's have some puppet characters on it. It's such a cool addition to the show.
Yeah, they were good. John Orberg built the worm and Miss Etta. I built the squirrels, but
Oh,
Right.
cool.
but we built two of one because we were like, that used to be our thing. We say, hey, if something happens, and they had mechs, we said if something happens, even if we magically appeared, like that, it would still take hours to fix something.
Exactly.
If you have two, you can keep shooting and then send us the one back, and we can fix. Although they never actually broke or anything. But we were always, especially if we're sending puppets away to another country, we would always say, hey, you want to have a backup, just in case.
Be a wonderful characters in that show.
Yeah. So quickly with Between the Lines, since we had already talked about that during the reunion,
Right.
And
Yeah.
how, it's now 25 years old. Like, how does that feel to you that, this show that went on for 10 years and, with all these wonderful lines and all these characters, how does it feel that show is like, 25 now?
Yeah. Well, the first couple of seasons, when it was, done in the beginning, we were shooting.
In New York, yeah, and then
well,
Mississippi, right?
Webberless World of Dr. Seuss, and I was working with Kathy Mullen, and Michael Frith was heavily involved with Webberless World because he worked with Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
On stuff. So, and he designed all the the puppet characters versions of the Seuss characters. They came up to me one day on the set and they said, "You guys build puppets, right?" So I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "Well, we got this show we're doing." So they started talking to me about Between the Lions. I don't think I knew the name of it or anything. So I said, "Sure, well, come to the shop and meet the other guys." So it just sort of fell out of there, and that's how we got that gig. And then, but the funny thing was, I was supposed to perform on it too from the beginning.
Like I'm Walter Pigeon and
Yeah, you said I remember you saying there's like some issue with like the with PBS or the
right.
station or something.
Well, no,
yeah.
just come off of I guess the final season of Bear in the Big Blue House, and I had a great time.
Right.
Such nice people. And then I get on the phone with the producers from Lions, and they're like, "So you doing the show or not?" And I'm like, "Well, what's the deal? Tell me, what's the money? Oh, I don't know. I don't deal with that. I have no time for that. I just have to know, are you doing the show or not?" So I said, "Well, no, I'm not going to say yes, and agree to something that I don't know anything about." I said, "I know about the show. We're building the puppets." I said, "But yeah, I'm totally interested in doing the show." They were like, "Well, we have to know right now." So I said, "Well, no, I'm not going to say yes without knowing a monetary figure of what am I making on the show, and what's my guarantee? How am I working the whole? She says,
Right.
she said, it sounds like you don't want to work on this show. So I'm like, you know what? I don't think I do, and I hung up on her. So Kathy Mullen, 10 minutes later, what's going on? I said, I don't know who that was, Kathy, but she's a real piece of work. I said, if that's one of our producers, that's yeah, she's like that. I said, well, I don't think I want to work with her. So I didn't do the first season. So Tyler actually went and ended up doing Walter Pigeon. Well, I mean, we built the puppets, and there was a ton of puppets on that show, and just constantly out. But they and then Tyler left after the first season because he didn't feel like they were giving him enough to do, and probably not because
and then he's doing all those voiceover gig segments he did for the rest of the show.
So I ended up taking it over from Tyler. So actually did, I guess he talked like that in the beginning, so that's when I said I
imagine
whatever. So so I got onto that show. It was actually the first three. I think we did 3 seasons. It was great.
New York, and then the rest of the show was Mississippi.
And they just went and pulled the plug on it. And then
whole funding.
A PBS station down in Missouri or Mississippi.
Mississippi,
really liked the show, so they pulled together enough money to shoot like another season to see what would happen. So it was funny. So they were like skimping costs all over the place. So first thing they did was, well, we don't need 3 Design, which was the puppet shop, our shop, to be involved. We'll just go down with the puppets. Everything will be fine. So we were like, oh, really? You got to do props. You got to do costuming. None of that stuff. No, we don't need you guys. No, we'll cover it down there. So we were like, okay. And we were like, wow, really? Wow. Okay. The first week into the new shoot down in Mississippi, one of the eyes on Theo disconnected, so only the one eye would pop open.
Right. I think it might. Did we talk? Did you
maybe
talk about any of you?
I know we talked about something with Click, but I don't think with Theo. That's interesting.
Right, Click. That's it. That's what I was thinking.
It broke Click well, that was when the very first week. I wasn't even working on the show, trying to finish puppets. Click, and they told me Click broke, and I said, no, you broke Click. So again, they didn't want to pay for a second Click.
Peter, what did you do? No.
So, well, he didn't do it on purpose. I mean,
I know.
It happened. So
exactly.
Anything. So we got to build the second Click, though. We have 2 clicks just in case, and then of course nothing broke after that. So you had the 2 clicks. Well, but you could pop her up in one spot, she'd zip and then appear back here. So it was nice having 2 for little tricks like that. So so anyway, so what was I saying about? Oh, so Theo's eye broke. So they call our shop, and I forget what we were building. We were building something. And I answered the phone, and they said, you guys have to come down to Mississippi right away and fix Theo's eye. I said, well, we're busy. Oh, no, you got to come. The eye's broken. You guys got to come down and fix it. I said, no, we don't. We don't work for you. Remember, you fired us off the show. We don't work on that show anymore.
Oh, my God.
So they were like, and meanwhile, John is sitting next to me. He's going, what are you doing? I said, let me handle this. So I said, no, I don't think. So it ended up weird back and forth thing. I refused to go. I said, no, I'm digging my heels in. I am not going down to fix this puppet. Let them see exactly what our contribution was to this show. Because it was kind of a disastrous first season down there. The cameramen had never worked with puppets. So they were constantly catching. I mean, to the point where they actually, to get it done on budget and on time, they literally just locked off all the cameras. So the puppets always had to walk in, deliver their lines, and leave. The camera could do it. All shot like film style, locked off. So John went down. To fix it. And I said, I don't know what it is. I said, you got to open the back of the head and get to the mech and see what it is. So what it ended up being, and I've never seen it before, I use a lot of Dubrow parts, and there's a little ball and socket thing called a link. It's a ball link, and what it does, it allows movement. But if there's a slop or if there's anything misaligned, it gives you a little extra so that nothing locks in place. Well, I've used a million of these things, and for some reason, this one, the little ball snapped off the machined part that is bolted to the eyelid. So John's on the phone, and I don't think we had FaceTime at this time.
Right.
I know what's in the head. Oh, I had photos. At my end, I had photos because we took photos of the mechanism before it went in. I said, see those two? See the Dura collars on either side? You got to take them out. Now you got to remove the shaft. All right, and you're going to drop the Teflon washers. You got to grab those. I said, now you'll be able to get the eyelid off. Now we got to remove the piece from the eyelid. And so anyway, I actually talked him through it on the phone blindly, while he's on the phone. And he got
That's crazy.
So
There you go. So,
well, that was first season. So I think they shot the next 5 or 6. They ended up doing 10. 3 Design was involved after that. I mean, we were never on set because they couldn't afford that.
right.
But to ship stuff back and forth, which I'm like, that's fine. At least they got it. Yeah, you know what? We're not,
Yeah, good job. Woo.
like I did a funny one Between the Lions when we were shooting Between the Lions. If there was any kind of a lighting or a technical issue, no problem. We would stop and they would like deal with it. But if there was oh my God, you would think we just murdered someone's dog or something because they would say, well, we have to keep shooting. And I'm like, no. I said, I said, pretend a lighting problem if you have to. So I got so fed up at one point. I said, the only person I told was Rob Gardner, who was our puppet wrangler at the time. I said, Rob, here's what I'm going to do tonight. I'm hiding the puppets. They're going to disappear. I said, I'm just putting them, but they won't know where to look into, I said, and when we get here in the morning, just play dumb. You don't know where they are. But just so you know, because I knew Rob is the emotional guy. I think he'd probably start crying or something. Somebody stole all the puppets. My point being was I let them scramble for like the first half hour of the day. And I said to them, wow, I guess this is a puppet show. So sometimes the puppets take, time to get their act together. I said, they're in the room down the end of the hall. They're like, you? I said, yeah, because of what you were doing to the puppet team in the room there, giving them 0 time to do anything because, oh, well, we got to keep shooting. Hey, a light needs to be tweaked. 15 minutes, to bring out the cherry picker. It's like, give us the same 15 minutes that we need. So it was fine after that. But I just want fairness. I'm not doing it to be, most of the stuff I used to tell people used to say, why do you do that in the studio? You're always coming up with ideas on how to shoot things. Whenever there's a problem, I like to solve it really quick. When we were shooting Bear, I did it a lot on Bear, and I ended up getting it. That was actually kind of a job of mine to pre-read scripts and make suggestions on how to shoot things and build rigs and stuff. And they were like, why do you get yourself involved with that stuff? You're hired as a performer. I said, honestly, you want to know why I do it? I have 3 little kids at home. And if I'm not home by 7:30 or so that night, I don't see my kids at all today because I leave too early in the morning to get to the studio. And if I get home after they're all in bed, I don't see my kids for the whole week. So in my mind, if we can wrap it by 6 o'clock, it's all like about me going home to my family, because it's the business is, Sesame Street was notorious for shooting till 10 o'clock at night. It was just, it's just things happen. I get that, but it's just too easy to pre-plan. It's like pre-plan it all, and the day should go smoother. Don't figure it out on the set because that slows everything down. So, anyway.
Right. And
Yeah.
and through Lions, sort of, because it was the same producers and everything. You also got to work on the short-lived Lomax, the Hound of Music.
Yeah, we shot the one season.
Like 13 episodes. It wasn't really that. It was kind of short-lived.
Yeah, I think, but it was kind of an interesting show. I mean, Chris Surf was really into it. Norman.
Oh,
Yeah.
We built
Wonderful,
those guys.
wonderful guys. They're
yeah.
so great.
John built the dog. Peter performed the dog. And
Yeah, and Jen got to perform the cat,
yes,
and
And then you performed one of the like fleas, little
yeah,
fleas.
yeah, where Pam got to perform the other
yeah,
flea. Yeah,
which was kind of fun. So we went down, and that was the same team in Mississippi. So I finally got
yeah,
and they were actually very pleasant people. I just think when you show up, if you've never done it before, you are quickly in over your head shooting a puppet show. So um, it was interesting to go down there and meet the people that you're always talking to on the phone that you kind of keep going. This guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. It's like that's not how you shoot a puppet show, you know. So that was a pretty good show. It had real potential. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I was what was the jokes that? Oh, we were Lewis and Clark because they were going through the dog's back, like on a the exploring, and they built this giant set with pool noodles. Each pool noodle was one hair on the dog's back, and
right.
we were
Oh, okay.
so that was kind of fun.
Oh,
Yeah, it was
that's cool.
a concept.
Yeah,
And Asbury worked on that show too.
Oh, Anthony
yeah,
Asbury. Yeah,
yeah, Anthony.
he's great.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun getting to talk about all stuff with Lions with all of you guys. But it was so much fun getting to
Yeah.
do that.
No, you know what? And it's funny. This New York, it's the puppetry world. I mean, it was at that time. It was a very small, compact world. Everybody knew everybody else. Everybody knew what everybody was working on. Everybody, oh,
Yeah,
you great. I try. You know, it's funny how I'm not a great auditioner. My thing is, if you want to hire me, I hope you've seen what we've done in the past, because if you want me to come in and be do it on an audition level, I'm not very good at it. That's if I have a fault, that's a huge one that I have. But the funny story with that is when they sent me the link to be an audition for send an audition in for the Helpsters, I looked down the list and they had like 60 other puppeteers, and I knew quite a few of them, and they're all really good.
right.
So I thought, I'll never get on this show. So I didn't even bother sending in a tape or signing up to come in and do it in person or anything. I was like, eh. And I was already Monkey Boys built the puppets, so I was already involved with the mechanisms for all the puppets for that. So that was enough for me at that time. So then the auditions come and go, and that week I get a second email thanking me for my audition and for whatever. And I'm thinking, well, that's weird. Then I'm realizing, oh, it's like a form letter. Once your email's on there, it's staying on there. So then a couple of days later, I get a call from Michael, one of the producers on the show, and he says, "Great to have you on the show, Jim. Congratulations." And I'm like, okay, all right. So I get off the phone and I call Tim Lagasse because I know he's on the show and he's the
Yeah,
like,
hilarious.
Tim.
There you go.
Getting the weirdest phone calls. I said, I just talked to Michael Cargill. I said, he's welcoming me to the show. He goes, oh, you're on the show. You're on the show. We got to have you on the show. You can do it. You're the guy. You're the guy we can always go to and figure things out. And I said, well, would have been good to know that. I mean, because I'm like in the dark here, Never actually gotten that. I didn't even have an inkling to try for or anything. So, but that was a lot of fun. There was a good group of people, Stephanie and, oh God, everybody.
Yeah, Mari and Jen,
Yeah. Oh, hey.
Kathleen,
Yeah.
Ingrid Hansen, and
Yeah. It
yeah,
was a good group, and it was fun working with the Monkey Boys, and which surprised me. They didn't want to do it the second season, so it ended up all going to the Puppet Heap, which they took it upon themselves to try to replicate my mechanisms using 3D printing. So when they built the new Mr. Prim, they sent it to Marty to try it out. So Marty
yeah,
up on the phone and he's like, "Hey Jim, it's Marty. I said, hey, Marty, how's it going? He goes, well, it's going really well. He says, I got the new Mr. Prim here. I have him on. I'm trying him out. I said, oh, how is it? How did they do? He's like, well, the eyes, I, and he was like stumbling for words. And I said, Marty, I didn't do the mechs. He goes, oh, thank God. They're terrible. They don't work. I don't know what they broke already. So, so I found out that they took it upon themselves to, without even asking me, which kind of like bothered me a little bit, but whatever. They replicated all the parts that I would make on my lathe here out of Delrin and stuff. They tried to do it 3D printing, and at that time, I mean, I don't know now, the plastics are out there, but at that time, the stuff is not very strong. It just doesn't, and I felt like if they had called me, I would have done a set for them. I mean, they're not super expensive, or I would have talked them through it, or at least helped them, or go to the shop the one day and take a look and say, wow, here's what's wrong with this one, that type of thing. But,
Yeah.
Paul's an interesting guy. He's I like working with Paul. It was a whole different experience working at the Puppet Heap shop. It was interesting, totally different. Not I always said, people always ask me, what's the one thing you learned? What's the best thing you learned from working for Kermit Love before you opened up your own shop that affected what you did in your shop? I said, well, I definitely learned how not to run a shop. And again, when things go wrong, I think you'll learn a lot quicker. When things are going really well, then learn anything. It's just everything's just happening. Whereas, so in Paul's case, I some things he did, I thought, wow, that's brilliant. And then some things he did, I would be sit there scratching my head, like, I don't know.
Right.
I'll give you one funny story from there. I don't know if I told it. No, probably not. We were talking lions. This is a funny story. We were building for the Muppet movie at Puppet Heap.
Oh, yeah.
Walter.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 2011 film. Yeah.
Yeah, and they wanted him to whistle. So I was doing all the mechanisms for all the new Muppets and redesigning a lot of them and changing things. And
Oh, wow, cool.
stuff like that. So Paul didn't want me to do this whistling mechanism. So the head of the shop, Duncan at the time, I said, well, what's going on? I mean, why would he have me do the mech? He says he doesn't want it to be a mech. He thinks it can be done organically by bending the puppet's mouth or doing, little rubber things or thimbles or something. So anyway, I said, oh, well, all right, fine. I had more than enough to do. I was like, we were all pretty swamped at that time. So after so many weeks, and then one can't think of his name. It's gonna kill me. But anyway, this guy's working on the puppet. Stefan's working on the puppet, and nothing's working. So they bring Mary Bremer over, and between Stefan and Mary, they can't get this organic. It's just and he's just basic, simple little Muppet, and so it's like a Friday. I'm going home, and I look over at him, and he's at his desk, and he's just holding the two puppet heads in his hand, and he looks at me and he goes, help me. So I come over, I said, Stefan, he doesn't want me doing a mech. He says, nothing's working. This puppet's due in 2 weeks. The whistling, they need it for the shoot, blah, blah, blah. So I said, all right, give me the patterns, give me what you got. We packed all this stuff up. I said, let me see what I can mock up at home. So I mock up this great little whistling mechanism, and it's working like a charm. So I bring it in the next day, and I show them. Everybody's like, but I know Paul's going to be like, probably pissed that we just went ahead and did this. So I'm sitting with it on my desk, and I'm playing with it, and in walked the two Disney reps, Debbie and oh God, I can't think of her name now. Well, anyway, the girl used to work for Muppets, and now she's in charge of the Disney Muppets, So they walk over and say, "So what are you working on, Jim?" I said, "Oh, it's Walter's whistling mechanism." "Oh, can we see it?" I said, "Sure." So I do it, and they go, "Oh my God, that looks amazing! That's fantastic!" They're just like, "Oh." So I said, "Really?" Paul hates it. She says, "Why? Why? Why don't you go ask him?" So that's how the mechanism got.
Oh gosh.
And
I mean, the wonderful Pierre Lance does such a great job in that character.
oh, his
that film
characters, yeah.
itself. That film itself is just wonderful.
Yeah, it was fun. I
Yeah. Oh,
didn't
good.
think they showed the mechanism off enough. And then I showed it to Bill when it was done. Bill Beretta came to the shop,
Bill, he's great.
and he saw it. He went, "Oh my God!" I said, "Yeah." I said, "But Bill, here's the thing: they didn't want to pay. They didn't want to make two. I was willing to do it for nothing. It's an unproven mechanism, and it's stretching the fleece. And this
Uh-huh.
fleece we were using, you don't know at what point will it stop doing. Will it stop behaving?" I said, "So don't use it a lot unless you're shooting. In other words, rehearsals, just pretend you're whistling. Do it all on camera because there's only the one puppet that can whistle." And so I said, I don't know, but it held up fine. It was fine. It's actually a really good mech, and it's so funny. I got a call like months after we delivered all that crap, and they were doing inventory, and they could find no photos of that mechanism. And when I thought about it, I said, "Yeah."
Oh no.
And then I rebuilt it at the place, and I didn't take any pictures of it. I mean, I know what I did in my head, but I was like, "Yeah." And then I actually didn't fess up. I actually said, "Oh, they'll know now." But I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure I took pictures." But
Yeah.
good puppet, good mech, and a pretty decent film.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, of
absolutely.
course. And of course you got to kind of be another Muppets project. You got the Puppeteer, which is another wonderful special Muppets Christmas letters to Santa as
Oh yeah,
well, which is so wonderful.
yeah. We shot. That was fun because it's the first time I ever got to work with Kurt Thatcher on in person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Worked with him as a director, and I thought he was. I thought, wow, he's just like me. He was so funny because and it was so funny because it's Disney, so Disney is really way too hands on. So everything he was trying to,
Yeah.
there were these guys questioning it, and he had this one brilliant response when they were asking, "What are you doing here? What's going on exactly?" He goes, and he starts explaining it like his whole intent of this scene is to totally ruin the film and make the special horrible. And then
What?
and they're like, and I'm going, and then the way they're listening, I said, they don't get the sarcasm here. They're not getting any of this. I'm like dying, standing there, thinking, "Yep, I've been there, yes, sir." You know, but he's a
Uh,
great guy.
It's crazy.
I really enjoyed it, and the shoot was fun. And again, it's probably the only time I got to work with the core group. I mean, we did little.
Right.
I did the Jimmy Fallon, the last show where they did that. But
oh,
Hmm.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
that was the only time I got to spend any time. And at that time, we were rebuilding the Gonzo mechanisms and the new Pepes too. And
Ah.
Bill was very happy with the new Pepe, and I finally got a decent Gonzo mech up and running. And then Davey hits me with the Gonzo they're using now. It's a slave system, so when you do the one eye, there's a rod that goes across and makes the other eye do the exact same thing. It kept jumping the track, and only one eye would go up on Gonzo and made him demonic. So Davey was like, "You think somehow you could get both, independent control of the eyes?" So after try after try after try after try to get these mechs made, they finally got one working really well. Now they want to change it all. So, but we ended up doing it, and your fingers go into Gonzo like this. So if you work this finger, you get both eyes going, or you can just work the one eye this way.
Yeah.
Different sort of a slave system we came up with. So
It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful special.
Yes, absolutely.
and then
Yeah.
a lot of our shop. We also did a lot of baseball mascots for a while. That when it got slow, we did
Uh,
Mr. Net, and then from there we did like 10 other teams. The Big Green Monster out in Boston and stuff. But
Oh wow. Oh, that's cool.
Big
I,
Green Monster.
yeah,
Wally? Is that his name?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
Okay.
uh,
I'm sure I
we
remember
did
that
Rock
character.
Dinosaur. We did I think it was Oakland Athletics had like an elephant character. It was like a bunch of them we did. But the first ones are always the ones you make a little money on, and after that, it's just brutal. And they all call up. You hear nothing from Major League Baseball about a new mascot in the off season. A week before opening day, hey, can we get a new Mr. Matt? And you go, yeah, but you're not going to get it in a week. The elves all quit. They don't work here anymore. It's like,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
but
Yeah. So before we kind of like start talking a little bit with your work and puppet mechanism side of things, and then like wrapping up. Of course, I want to kind of like ask, what was it like getting to with since we already talked about already with Bear, now with another Mitchell Creekman shows that you got to do. What was it like getting to puppeteer on both? Kind of be involved in both with a kind of a tabletop puppetry, which is the Book of Pooh, and it's a big world. So what was it like for you being involved in
yeah,
those type of series like that in that kind of style of puppetry?
yeah, it was kind of we did Book of Pooh first when Mitchell did his new computerized camera, and all the backgrounds were computerized. It was kind of a cool thing. And then so we're building all the versions of the Pooh puppets based upon
Wonderful puppets too.
Oh
yeah,
yeah. Oh my
So
goodness.
great.
the original turnarounds from Disney and stuff. And then basically, Mitchell opened his shop on the it was on the west side, lower west side. He hired me. I still had my shop going, and we were building all the mechanisms in there. But he hired me to be the shop foreman to check on how it was going every day, which was kind of like I'm like not that guy to do that. But I said, okay, yeah, I'll just.
Right.
We had an amazing, talented bunch of builders. There was no worrying about the puppets turning out crappy at all because you had Matt
Yeah.
Brooks, had Eric Engelhard there. I mean, it was everyone who worked who was building.
Peter, Jen,
Yeah,
Jody,
Noel,
Cindy.
Tyler, yeah. So all the wonderful greats.
And,
so,
and and
Really
all
fan.
yeah, and all of them in the green suits and like
Yeah,
doing
like
all the
three
and
or
kind of
four
like
people working on a character, like it's crazy.
yeah, like for the arm and the
The
face and the
legs.
feet and legs, yeah.
yeah, there was a whole. I mean, we had a long
A
discussion.
whole team of each pie part.
Yeah, but we had a whole team of a whole team. We had a whole bunch of meetings on how to shoot this, and one of the things we built because my thing was, their concern was, of course, this style of puppetry. There's a lot of errors and stuff, so you're constantly shooting, picking up and
Yeah.
having a lot
Yeah,
of,
the green screen.
and you're shooting single camera. So
Yeah.
you want to do a close up if and most scenes had three characters in them at least. So you do a master shot with all three, and then you do close ups on each of them, and you're going to edit it all in post. It's a time consume. You're shooting a TV show at the pace of shooting a movie, so it makes it super tight. So we came up with this thing, and they never shot it. I never understood why. We were just kind of trying to come up with ways to save time on each episode. So I came up with this idea that the episodes always end with they do anyway, like even the cartoon series, the
Yeah, like
the walking together and they're talking about, what they just learned or something. So I wanted to do it that they start walking and then we cut to it's the back of the characters and they're walking away from the camera. So we could shoot it once and you can dub in whatever dialogue you want because we're not seeing their faces or their mouths.
Hmm.
goodbye for now. Yeah,
When
wonderful
they
song.
shot Star Trek, the first Star Trek series on TV back in the 60s, they shot a lot of generic stuff that they would use over and over in the episodes. And that saved them budget and time to shoot, the spaceship going through, being hit by blasts, them rocking away, when they're getting hit by things. That's all, it's all basic footage that they have available that they don't have to shoot for each episode. So I wanted to do that on Pooh. We actually built the puppets. They had rods coming out of their faces, and you just saw the backs of their heads, and they would be and everything was rotted. Everything in the normal puppets was rotted from the back, forward, so you could see their faces out here. We reversed it all. You're just working a rod with his head turning and stuff, and
Yeah.
thus put any dialogue. And I don't think they understood what we were trying to do, but the puppets got built and they never shot it. So it was a lot of long days. I had a funny thing I used to do because I was also working at my shop, and I forget what we were building at the time. We were very busy, and I they always wanted me to come in because they were always short puppeteers, wearing the blue suits. So
Yeah.
if I went in 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days, I would get the day rate. So let's say the day rate was $300. So I would make $900 to go in for 3 days. If I went in a fourth day and then possibly a fifth day, they could pay me for the week, and the week's pay was like less than working 3 days, whatever the week was. So whenever they called, I always told the producer, I said, I can only give you 3 days this week. Partly, I also needed to be at my shop, but also if I worked the fourth day, I would lose money. So they never caught on to that. So when I worked on Book of Pooh, I was only there 3 days out of the week every week because I figured out the math. I said it doesn't pay for me to go in and get the weekly rate. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful puppets on that show. And Frank, can I have that, for most of the Winnie Pooh franchise things, it's more animation, but to have a kind of puppetry kind of style, show for Winnie the Pooh to have, I think that's a great thing to do.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so moving on to Big Big World, what was that show? And of course, the wonderful Peter Landscape to do mainly on the show, Snook, Eco Sloth, and Tim,
Yeah.
and
Originally,
and
going to be Noel again doing the
it
lead.
was a lot like.
No, Noel was going to do the league, but they was going to be Snook, and they couldn't work something out. And Noel, just recently got married and stuff, so his life was different. So and they were shooting
Right.
Island, and it's like I'm from the eastern end of Long Island, and I know what that takes to shoot out there. I mean, you're not commuting that, that's for sure. So it was a difficult shoot. Well, I mean, we didn't build any of the puppets. The puppets were all built up in Jean Guy's studio in I want to say Montreal. I think he's up in Montreal, and they all showed up unfinished, and none of the mechanisms worked. So it was interesting. I was hired to be one of the puppeteers because you needed, again, like Book of Pooh, you needed a dozen puppeteers to handle all these characters because there's like 3 people on each character. But the puppets themselves needed a lot of work, so they hired me,
Hmm.
Heather Ash, to clean up the puppets and fix all the mechanisms. And I mean, literally, the mechanism literally did not work, or you'd pull them once, and they did a lot of resin casting things, and they would just snap right off. So we had to it was just, and the puppets even on camera didn't read. Like they tried to go. I forget who designed them, but they tried to go with like realistic eyes and everything, and you got them,
Yeah.
and they just looked. They didn't read. They weren't sympathetic. You didn't. They were not attractive puppets at all. So there's like a major amount of fixing to do on them. So Heather did a lot of the cosmetic type stuff. I was more like ripping them apart, and I put, like on Book of Pooh, we came up with those mechanical hands and stuff. I put all those on the ones that needed it. A lot of the puppets had practical hands, but the hands were just done so badly, and they were done out of the foam latex. And they literally, 2 days into it, they're ripping and falling apart, and you're trying to glue everything back together. I said, "There's no way this is going to last, 15 episodes. We're not lasting 15 days, trying to get these puppets to do their thing." So we ended up rebuilding a lot of them, and I would say most of them. There was something wrong with all of them, and so it became like uh, in the beginning, a little bit of
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
late night every night, getting it ready for the next day. And the weird part is, I went out there. I went out to the eastern end of Long Island to shoot this as a performer, and I was going to run the puppet shop there if you needed propping or any kind of special rigs or something, because I was doing all the rigs on Bear and stuff. So,
Mhm.
so when I had to suddenly fix things, I didn't have my tools with me. I had nothing with me. I didn't bring anything. So little by little, I had to bring, you know, every time I went home, I would load up the car or the truck. I didn't know it was a car I had at the time, and bring everything I think I could possibly need to fix so and so's eyes so they work better and stuff. So And in all fairness to Jean Guy too, I talked to him about it, and and Matt Brooks worked on those puppets too.
In
Matt
my books, yeah, uh-huh.
and he
I know Puppet Heat might have been involved in a little bit of that too.
yeah, and he said that they the approval process was so slow that and the deadline never moved. And I know when we do contracts with our shop, if you didn't approve, a puppet at a certain point, the delivery date was now null and void. You had to push it. You were adding a week onto the delivery, but they didn't do that. And these puppets literally showed up, some of them unfinished at all, and there was a lot of good stuff there that just needed a lot of tender loving care to make it shine on camera. So Heather did amazing work. Heather, but and then the first season was fine. I mean, everybody, it was a
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
went
everyone was there. Like, like I said about the puppeteers, like, yeah, of course, Pierre was there, Tyler, Julie, James Godwin, Tim, and
yeah, God,
Melissa, Amy, Garcia.
yeah.
But then it was season two came, which just kind of like it was just kind of like different. There's some characters that kind of like weren't there, and then we on that kind of like came
Well,
while Tyler was doing that.
here's what Mitchell would do, and he did this. He developed this wonderful camera system with the 3D backgrounds, and perfected it on Pooh. It actually worked really good on Pooh. In the beginning of Pooh, there were issues because it's all like this weird tracking thing, and
Mhm.
and it's all computer run. I mean, I don't know a lot about computers, but I know um, they would having issues, and they would have to basically override the system and add in something to stop it from doing what it was doing. So by the time Pooh was done, everything worked really well. So then we go out to do Big Big World, and season one, he's changed the camera, he's changed the lenses. It's all these changes were done, which would give you a better final product. But what it did was the old computer gizmos, whatever it is, the computer programs that gave you the 3D backgrounds and locked it all in with the live stuff you were doing, were having the same glitches because now it's all different. The lens is different on the camera. There's all these changes. So
Right.
season in the beginning of figuring it out. So when we came back for the second season, it was the same thing all over again to the point where something was so majorly out of whack that they couldn't move the camera. The puppets would jump in and deliver their lines and jump out. It was like
Okay.
all this floaty, there's all this moving in and all this stuff going on. So,
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, I kind of noticed that.
but then in the middle of all this, um, there was some sort of because Sony Television, I guess, got
Yeah.
involved with this show and the development of the the 3D backgrounds and stuff. And I guess from what I could understand, what happened was Mitchell had a due date, and he was supposed to deliver, let's say, 5 episodes finished, by halfway through the shooting schedule. He only delivered, I think, 2 and a partial third one. Like they were nowhere near done because there were so many technical issues because everything got changed again. That Sony had a very negative reaction to that and came in and like seized the show. And it was like he was in breach of contract or something because contractually he's supposed to hand them 5 shows, and then they could they had
Right.
shows and they didn't have. So that's what killed that show. And it was literally like I was home. It was a break we were on, and I get a call from somebody who's there. I said, "Hey Jim, come here and get all your stuff because the bank came in and seized the studio. They seized the puppets. They've shut the whole thing down. Any of your stuff, you got to get it out of here right away." So like that day, I jumped in my car and I drove out there, and I got all my tools and stuff. And I should have took because on that show I built all these little bug characters that were all over, all these flies
Right. Uh-huh. Right. Yeah, I remember those.
things, and not they were sort of like gave me something to do when I wasn't on set, and then they became like, oh, we need a dragonfly. So I would build a dragonfly. I wasn't really
Mhm.
for them. So technically they were my puppets, even though technically were also the Shoots puppets. So they sort of I guess they got seized with everything else. So it's but I don't know. It's just one of those things. It was
Yeah.
fortunate because we had such plans, especially for the second half of the shoot. We had all these ideas we wanted to because it was such a visual show. It was beautiful when that thing was
Oh
going
yeah.
off. Um, you know, the puppetry was the puppet,
Great.
but I felt like it as a show, it really worked really well. Um,
Oh yeah, definitely.
yeah, it just had
Yeah, it's beautiful.
it was really it's like it was so good. You thought they should do a movie because it would be like on a big screen that would have looked so good.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
one of
So
Yeah.
these.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, another wonderful show. And now some of the characters from that series, Snook, Britta, Rihanna's now you can all can just check it out. Them over at Center Puppetry Arts, which is pretty cool.
It's kind of interesting. That show had like it had a weird like black cloud always floating over it to the point even when they did all this merchandising. And remember here
Uh-huh.
all the Christmas toys from China, they were recalling everything because they used lead paint on
Oh
all
yeah, right.
and all the preschoolers would put things in them. Well, what's most of our toys are on like it's in the group shot that they're showing on the news. It was all the big world, the tree house and the characters all painted with lead paint. Like and it was an environmental show, which I thought, that's not a good sign. For an environmental show, we're going to produce poison product.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Oh man. So now now moving on to the puppet mechanisms stuff. So the first question I want to ask is because like with different types of mechanisms, how do you kind of decide which type is best for like a particular puppet?
All right, what I try to do, like if we're doing like when we did Johnny and the Sprites, they wanted all the sprites to have pop open lids, and
Right.
I was like, we usually don't put all we usually don't put on all the characters the same mechanism. We always try to give them an identifiable mechanism that makes them them. Like it's just like the costume, like Ernie's shirt, Bert's eyebrow. Nobody else has that eyebrow. It's Bert's eyebrow. You know what I mean? So when
Mhm.
so they wanted these things, so we would do just slightly different versions. Like Lily's eyes closed, I believe, and the other and Basil had the wild eyes, and Leslie's character had the pop.
Ginger, yeah.
He had the pop open lids, and I think Seymour had eyebrows. So we try not to.
Mhm.
We want to give a mechanism that the puppeteer can get a lot of use out of, changing the expression. But and then they all had wings, so the wing mech you can kind of like, um, cut us a little slack on that. Basically, the wings just had to fly. But Ginger, we did a full RC version of Ginger when she flew around the set. She could lip sync, and her wings were all controlled electronically. Um, but a lot of the secondary puppets, like all the fuzzies and that, they were just
Mhm.
Muppet type things. And who else was on? We had a frog, and they were like they added occasional
Right.
one offs, like plants that talked or something.
Right, yeah.
That
Yeah.
mechanism you try to give a mechanism that aids the character. Like if it's a sneaky character, you may want to give them eyes that look, side to side or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So, you try to figure it out that way. And sometimes you also got to talk to the puppeteer. Like when we did Mr. Knack on Eureka's Castle, Brian
Uh-huh.
was a brilliant performer, puppeteer,
Yeah.
writer, book author. Just like I don't know,
Yep.
doesn't do well. There probably is a short list. Um, when we were building Mr. Knack, I tend to put my eye controls on a center pull in the head, so you can control the guy working the head or the gal working the head. The performer working the head can be in charge of the facial stuff. If you run an outside cable, which is like a lot of the movie special effects, you have multiple people just working just the brows. it takes a lot more takes to sync it up that you get the expression you want. Whereas if you can give it all, mostly to the performer working the head, that's then they can control the mechanism at the exact same time they tilt the head. There's less of a timing mistake that can happen. That's why in a lot of my mechs, if you look at the slides on this thing, you can, on this mech, you can control 1, 2, 3 different mechanisms all on one hand, and that trigger setup can also be used, can be mounted on the arm wire handle. So you're working the head, you're working the arm wire handle for the arm, and you can control 3 facial things at once if you want to. So you try to do that. It will speed your shoot along, and it also, I think, gives a better performance, and an easier performance to get. So
Right.
Right.
Was there like a puppet mech job that you'd say like you're most like proud of, like one that sticks out to you?
Puppet job. Well,
like public mechanisms that you kind of like the most proud of. That it's like, I did such a great job on that, kind of like a feeling, so to speak.
yeah, I did a little character for a web series. I don't think it's been sold yet. You might be able, if you look it up. It's called Bridie's World, and it's a little tiny firefly, and it's done in a blue room with it. It's kind of like, remember Blue's Clues? It was the human and they had the dog.
Yeah, of course.
With the human, and they go on adventures, and they so it was shot in Ireland, and Tyler actually was the director on it and did a lot of the.
Oh, okay.
Well, that little,
Okay, that's cool.
I'm very proud of. He's got a lot of things going for him. I'm actually, it's hard to say one thing. I would say if you want to look at it from what's the best thing you ever worked on, I would have to say Eureka's Castle.
Oh, that's great.
Because of the situation, they left us alone. Total freedom, creative freedom was like you couldn't ask for any more creative freedom, and such a good group of people. I mean,
R.L. Stein got to be involved in that. It's crazy.
I mean, every show has a great group of people, and they're all. I don't say I've ever worked on. I mean, probably, if I really thought about it, I'd probably think like, oh yeah, there was that one really horrible show, but they all have merit to me. If you can go home and think of one thing you did today that was a good moment. I hope they don't cut it. That type of thing.
Yeah.
But mechanism wise, or puppet building wise, this latest thing, if you can find it, Bridie's World. I don't think they've sold it yet. They did like 13 episodes, and they've been shopping it around. I haven't heard, but I saw an episode, and they're like 5-10 minute episodes. There's these little short, I guess it'll be on a site somewhere or something. I don't know how they sell these things.
Okay, probably it's not up yet. Do you know where that's gonna be up, or do you know?
No
episodes.
They haven't.
Yeah, I don't think it's up yet.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Well, anyway,
we'll see eventually.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that.
But I mean, stuff like I mean, a lot of the I'm trying to think, a lot of the secondary characters on Johnny and the Sprites were fun mech things. Like there was this acorn guy with little legs that walked around, and the acorn top popped up, and he had eyes that looked around.
Right.
It's just all these, and the stilt walking ant. A lot of those were designed. Michael Schupeck designed them, and
Michael, it's great.
He's cool.
Got to
talented guy, another talented individual too.
Those are the best characters. They're not even in the script, but if you do an opening scene, the camera's panning, and this thing walks by. It just.
Yes.
Those are kind of the best things in the world.
Absolutely.
I'm not I like it when my character has very little to say, which gives you so much time to do things. The puppeteer
give you more freedom. Say I have to be so much pressure being such a lead character. You're gonna be in like every single shot, every single day. But you can just kind of like, okay, I'm going to do this. Okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
Kind of feeling.
Yeah, but like I say, every show there's nothing I'm unproud of. I might not be proud of the way they shot it or the final result of the thing, but
Right, of course.
everything, you'd like to. But my whole thing is, you hire me to do the puppets, you're going to get the best puppet I can give you, and that's important to me. That's why whenever I worked for Henson, Henson was an hourly rate thing, and I told him I don't work hourly. I said, what do you want to spend, and I'll do it for that. Because my whole thing is, if I'm halfway through building something and I absolutely despise what I did, I should be allowed to put it aside and start over again. And that's on me, because I want it to be I can do. And I made a mistake, or I did whatever. So.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
It
So-
kind of happens in the puppetry biz,
Yeah. So now, as we're about to wrap up this last question that Jake is about to ask, is a question we ask every guest at the end. Go ahead, Jake.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much, Chris. So, of course, podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of? In your own words, how would you define the word nostalgia? What does nostalgia mean to you, Jim?
Nostalgia to me, old school when it comes to puppetry. No CG. No,
Yes.
I much rather rig stuff practically and through editing, using the media, not using, any of this CG stuff or any of the tricks like that. I mean, there's a place for that. I'm sure there is.
Right.
It's not that when I think of nostalgia, I think of that. I see like something like The Wizard of Oz. To me, it's like there's
Yes, classic.
is nonstop miracles. Think of the 1939 and look what they did. And they did it so well. And it's all, well, there's some matte shots, but even the matte shots are done practically, it's just a lock off on the camera. But that Twister footage, that thing they built, and the
Yeah.
it's just a whole, to me, that is nostalgia to me. That I watch Turner Classics all the time for that. Just that
Yeah.
and it's about, when it comes to nostalgia, when you look at old shows and stuff like that, I always feel everything about what was produced there is about the show. And I feel like we produce things nowadays that there's ulterior motives, and things like that. So
That's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much. Great words, stand on.
anyway, that's how.
Wonderful answer.
All righty. Well, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, Jim, great getting to speak to you again, as always.
Yeah.
Enjoy the rest of your day. This was a blast.
Yeah, it's great talking to you, Jim. It's a lot of fun. Great meeting you
Enjoy the
again.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great talking
absolutely.
about throughout all the things you did over the years. It's a lot of fun.
Yes. All right. Keep in touch, Jim.
Okay. Take care.
All right,
Bye.
great rest of your day. A lot of fun. Take care, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again. Bye. A lot of fun. That's great.
Yes, it was great. Thank you guys
Yes.
for tuning into another wonderful episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. We absolutely enjoyed our time speaking with Jim Kroupa. Keep on the
Yeah.
lookout for more wonderful interviews coming your way. And as always, what do you say, Jake?
Yes, keep nostalgia alive. Take care, everyone. See you next time. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode. Be sure to follow Jake and the Happy Nostalgia team on social media, check out our website, and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.